Hey everyone, thank you for your patience. We were having a little bit of technical difficulties there, but Catch 'em All Collectibles here. Tonight we do have a very special guest, Jake from Pokenomics. I believe all of you, I'm not even going to say most, I think just all of you know who Jake is, but for the one or two people who might not, Jake, you want to give them a quick rundown of who you are, what you got going on, and then what we're going to talk about tonight?
Sure. Yep. Started as a collector, went to as a kid, found it again as an adult. Dan and I met 2017, probably 2018, somewhere in there on E4 back in the day, when we were both really learning about the hobby during those years and kind of starting to both collect and flip some cards. And Dan went full time 2-3 years probably before I eventually did. We both eventually ended up going full time, and now we're both full time in Pokemon with our variety of businesses. Some very similar, some different. Yeah, we've been friends. We're Patreon partners. The Pokenomics Patreon is Dan and I's creation. So for those who are on there, they probably know who I am, and they see us talking every month. But yeah, I've been off YouTube for the better part of 3 years, and Dan's been still putting in the work here and
on that grind,
on the 10,000 subscriber grind. So get them there, guys.
Then I'm going to delete the channel and it's going to be over with.
Yeah. But yeah, I thought it would be fun. Dan and I haven't had this conversation specifically in a while, like probably many years. And I thought it'd be interesting and fun to just talk with him. And I think this. So I had I haven't told you this, Dan, but I have a cousin who is just graduating from high school who wants to do full-time Pokemon. That's what he wants to do.
Oh, nice.
And I told him to watch your channel. And one thing, I think this conversation will be useful to him. And I think this conversation will be interesting for everyone, because we're going to talk about it. Like, if we can still have our knowledge, but if we go back to, we only have $10,000, and that's about where he's starting, this like $5,000 to $10,000, amount, and what moves would we make. And I have a feeling Dan and I are going to be also have different things to say on this, which will be more interesting for people. And it can be like a wider variety, because we do some of the same things, but we also do a number of different things. And then I thought, Dan, we'd probably talk both about like just everything, like how we would collect, how we would build a business, how we would invest, like what literally, if we were to put ourselves, and I don't know if you want to do you want to put an age on it? Do you want to put a younger age, or do you want to just use our current age? Because that does matter.
Oh, yeah. Like, one thing I always say is that we're all in the same arena of Pokemon, but we're all playing very different games. As you said, some are collecting, some are investing, speculating, some are straight gambling, some are running a business. So we're all playing different games, and we're all playing by very different rules. Some people are paying the full shop public rates on eBay. Some people have decades-long relationships and 8-figure sales, and they have single-digit percentage points that they're paying for fees. But I'm fine to do it from whatever perspective you want to. I actually did a video. Maybe I'll even pull up a couple slides as we talk through the night. Maybe I won't, but I made a video a few months ago now where I talked about like a 6-month startup plan, starting from scratch. There are so many angles. Do you do it with none of today's brains, none of today's but yeah, if you want to go with like 10K, knowing what we know, that works for me.
I was thinking of doing it with the mindset of like, I'm talking to my cousin. And the reason I think that'll actually be the best for everyone here is he's 6 months in. He's young. He doesn't have that much startup money. And so it kind of starts us off there. And I think stuff we're going to get to and say as we build will like apply to everyone here, including ourselves, and things we're working on now. But to kind of start with the building blocks, which I don't know how often you get to talk about really, because we're probably mostly talking about kind of like small 2% improvements on our current business rather than like really starting like where would we completely start from scratch. And I thought what would be cool is that Dan and I normally, or at least I speak for myself, like I am careful not to give financial advice because every person's in a completely different financial situation. And I actually like would be comfortable like hanging out with a friend and if I knew all of their financial situation, I'd be happy to like have a more nuanced conversation, which like Dan and I will have with individuals. But when you give blanket sort of things online, you have to be really careful because for one person we might say one thing and for another person we're going to say something completely different. So I thought from this we could kind of talk out all those options with the idea that like it's us. So people should listen to this with we're not telling other people what they should do with their money. We're telling people exactly what we would actually do with our money if we went back in those days and use it like that. This is just us two guys who have had success in different ways, with their strategies. We're not coming here saying this is the best or only, or blanket or whatever.
Yeah. So the demographic that we're kind of touching on here, rewind ourselves in time, no families, no mouths to feed, 18, 19 years old, graduating high school, foregoing college, just going right into the pokey workforce as it is. Okay. So I guess I'll start like 30,000 foot level and we can see how much we'd hone in. The biggest thing that I always say, and it's a talk that I've walked over the past 12 years as well. Everyone is very different. I think I don't know if I'd call it an issue, but one interesting thing that you need to keep in context when you listen to people, myself included, a lot of people give advice very biased towards what is their operation, what is working for them. People who run Japanese wholesale businesses will tell you that that's the way to go because that's the way that they went because it was best for them. I always say that, again, same arena, different rules, different blah, blah, blah. Try everything. What I've done over the past 12 years and what I would recommend anyone to do, everyone's geography is different. Some people might be able to go to a show every weekend within 15 minutes of them and just buy raw, grade, flip, make money. There might be plentiful, raw, gem quality candidates out there. And I'm sure at some point tonight we'll address kind of the PSA situation and all that. But in my 12 years, I have sold on every platform. I've bought from every platform. I've vended. I've attended as a buyer various shows. I've gone to national shows. I've gone to local shows. I've done a little bit of everything. I've been a consigner. I have consigned. So I know there's like a lot. It's kind of daunting, but I would try to do in the first few months. And I know 10K, like fairly limited capital. I would try to get a little taste of a bit of everything that's out there. I know that's very broad, but like let me just bounce it back to you, see what you think on all that, what you say. And I guess one thing that I'll add to, presuming that you're doing this as a business, and I guess this one answers one of the questions that came up. The number one, in my opinion, single biggest mistake that people make, or at least one of the top 5, I guess, is they're operating as a business and they're paying sales tax. I will give very, very few specific bits of tax and or financial advice. This is tax and financial advice. This can be verified on the IRS publications on their website. If you are buying items with intent to resell, you are operating as a business. If you have a profit incentive, which the background on this scenario is, you should not be paying sales tax on eBay on items you are buying with intent to resell. It is a very simple process. Mind you, like depending on where you're from, it's called something different everywhere. I live in Oneida County, New York. That is different from every other county, thousands of counties in the United States. I would get a DBA at my local county building. I would get a reseller certificate of authority, New York calls it. I would fill out an ST-120, and I wouldn't pay sales tax on Amazon. I wouldn't pay sales tax on eBay on items intended for resale. So I guess I ended up doing more there. But that's one of the number one mistakes that people make. Don't put yourself 10% behind everyone else. Because when most businesses buy, they're buying at 70, 80, 85% of market. If you're trying to buy at 110% of market, you're going to have a significantly harder time than you should.
So I think for me, like the way that and again, this is using my knowledge today. Okay. Where I would start specifically is I would say to myself, okay, this business is about margin and it's about speed and liquidity. And I personally also really like to collect and have a goal of collecting, and I want to hang out with people and make friends. So I also thought we'd probably answer these questions kind of personally, and then people can say, hey, that's important to me too. Let me listen to Jake. Hey, that's not important to me. Maybe Dan's more my mentor here, kind of like what he did. But so for me, taking that $10,000, I am going to start looking for collections. I'm going to start going to local shows is one of the first things I'm going to do. Engaging in my local area. I'm going to start going onto eBay, and I'm going to start searching auctions with keywords like Pokemon lot. And then I'm going to advanced search, and I'm going to put in only lots that have been bid on, which will mostly filter out the lots that probably are bad and no one's interested in. And then I'm going to look for lots in a certain price range, generally from $100 to $500, with lots of ultra modern cards that I could potentially grade and get more. And I'm going to blanket bid on all of those using a sniper tool at 70%, 65% of market. Okay. Now, when you're starting off with only 10,000, it's going to take a little bit of time, but you're probably going to get 5 to 15 auctions like that a week. Okay. And with only $10,000, you're going to be able to deploy $2,000-$3,000 of your capital into that. So that's what I would suggest doing. The other 7,000, I would start deploying your capital in. You have to leave a few thousand probably for grading, which I would start to do. And again, we're in a difficult grading environment. And so we'll get into should you grade with CGC, should you grade with PSA, again, with $10,000 just to start, Dan, and then we can talk about how we would scale that up over time. But literally what I would do, go onto eBay, use the sniper tools, start winning those auctions at ideally at 50%, 55%. It's doable if you are willing to put in the effort and work. Trust me, I still do it to this day, sometimes when I have time. Go onto your local Facebook groups, go to shows during the summer. People are starting to talk about this right now, right this second. Things are softening a little bit. It's a little bit easier to buy. A month ago, it was impossible to buy. People were paying 85, 90, 95%. You have to, if everyone around you is paying 85+%, leave. Forget it. Because you can find stuff at 65, 70, 75%. You just have to look where other people are not looking, and you have to work harder than the next person. And if you have a small amount of capital, and again, this is not the right or wrong way, because you could also buy at 85% and just try and flip, you could try and liquidate faster, right? I personally would work more towards developing good margin, making sure I was safe with that margin so I could protect my capital. And I would try to set some sort of goal of like, I'm going to make $5,000 a month. Now part of this to start, okay? Doing the eBaying. And then once I got the cards, I would start putting some aside for grading, which of course is going to cost money. I would factor those in into my sort of like $5,000 a month profit, or like what I'm trying to achieve. I would factor those cards in I wouldn't count those as a loss just because I don't have them, but I wouldn't factor in what I think they're going to grade. I would just factor in like their full market value. So when I say make 5,000 a month, what I really mean is increase your inventory and cash, your assets, your total assets, 5,000 a month. Because ideally, you don't have to take any of that 10,000 and spend it on anything. Which brings me to my next point: live at home, if you can. Live at zero expenses, and if you can, get a job, get a second job. Whatever it is, bagging groceries, working at McDonald's. Use that extra capital to pay for your living, and then put your money into your inventory. Because getting your inventory from that 10,000 to 50 to 100,000 is what I would suggest first. And I wouldn't do anything other than buying those eBay collections and then going to local shows and Facebook Marketplace. Personally, I don't think anything makes any sense, any bigger business, any model. Now, what you do want to start doing as you go is making connections, networking, doing favors for people, developing relationships, starting to talk to people. If you have a knack for content, shoot some of those videos, make a series, brand new, just starting out, 17-year-old out of high school, be humble, be yourself, videotape what you've got going on. Don't come on and pretend to be an expert. Just show the process of kind of what you're doing, figure out how to make that interesting and useful to people, right? I would do that while I was doing it, and then network and make connections. And what that looks like down the line is you're trying to find people that you can start to wholesale to. And what I mean by wholesale is you're moving away from just selling to end consumer, because I haven't talked about how to sell these cards yet, which is a difficult part. But initially, you're probably going to want to be selling it local. You're going to vend and do local shows and sell these collections. And you're going to want to start an eBay page and sell on eBay. And you're going to start to build your eBay page, and it's going to be a bit slow. I personally am not a big TCG player guy, and I think the speed of TCG player, I would just go to eBay personally. But again, there's no necessary right or wrong way. I'm also more comfortable with eBay. Start building your page there. Get to that. What's it called? I don't remember the term now. I'm literally on eBay Live. The what's it called? Seller best. What's the name of
top
like
rated?
When you get
Top rated seller.
Yeah, and I don't remember the metrics now. It's something like 99%. You got to make sure that you ship everything. You ship it on time. Your ratings have to be strong. It'll explain all of that on eBay again for the person who's never done this before. Work on getting that, set that goal, and then and then start going to local shows, both buying a little bit and selling at the tables. And you want to find local shows where you can get a table for $50, $100, no more than that. You have to be careful not to spend too much money on the table, because again, you only have $10,000 to work with. So that's the combination I would start with. And again, the grading stuff, Dan, I'd be really careful with grading right now. We can go into grading next. Because of the time it's taking, I'd be really cautious. I'm not sure I'd grade anything with PSA if I only get $10,000 at this point, just due to speed, due to, it would have to be like I get like an amazing deal on like a Lovebirds type card, and I think I can, and it's perfect, and it's like, well, I'm going to wait 6 months, or sorry, I don't have to wait 6 months because I can, do one of the higher grading tiers,
300 or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But even then, that's quite a risk, and tens are never a sure thing. So why don't I hand it back to you, and then, and I'll say one more thing. The other thing I'd be doing is and I sort of mentioned this, but making friends, introducing yourself, going out to eat with people, like having human conversations. Don't just talk about business all the time. Get to know people, get to know why they're here, what they're doing. Enjoy yourself, and try to set goals, like monthly goals, specific goals. It's like, okay, I'm going to try and build my inventory this month, this much on average, right? And I'm going to try and make, these relationships and these types of things. And then just be consistent, persistent, patient, building that mindset, early on, and then not comparing yourself to other people. Try to enjoy the process, and understand that I started when Dan and I have both, it's no secret, have made millions doing Pokemon at this point. But we started when we were like mid to late 20s. You're starting when you're 17. So you have so much time that if you do what Dan and I did from 17 to our age, even if the market just stays the same, I think you can do as well as we've done by building a really big business, a really strong business over that amount of time, and generating revenue by finding margin and liquidating, not by investing. You don't need to invest at all. Although we will talk about investing tonight, and I do invest a lot, so we'll get there.
that was one thing I was going to say too, is like, we're going to talk a lot tonight about what you should do. I think the last thing you should do when you have very limited capital and very presumably excess time. Like back when I was a teenager, if I didn't immediately go to college, I could have worked 100-hour weeks. I mean, in a market like this, I likely would have been working some 100-hour weeks with all the opportunity, with all the liquidity. A lot of people get caught up in this thing. Prices 10, 12 years ago were so low, you could get base set boxes for under $1,000. Yes, prices were significantly lower. Market activity was a fraction. Liquidity was a fraction of what it is today. And price is only one part of the equation. I think by all metrics, I can't think of like a singular metric by where it is more difficult today to do and start up a new business than it was like 12 years ago. And one tool that I'll talk about, I used to do the game on eBay, go looking up newly listed. I did like a $500 minimum collection, Pokemon lot, whatever the keywords were that I wanted to use. And I would look for ending soonest, and I would look for newly listed buy it nows too. Sometimes I would grab $1,000 binder that was listed as buy it now 5 minutes ago that nobody else really had the time to peruse through. And I as Jake said, I was able to buy some stuff 50% of market. And then I'd literally just take that in. And with the tools we have today, back in my day, 12 years ago, I used to only be able to take pictures or pull scans from pkmncards.com. I used to be able to only manually create 20 listings an hour, roughly, say 3 minutes a listing. What was being fairly efficient and doing pretty decent listings. Today, with a tool, and I'm not affiliated at all. I talked about it last week with Nick over on PokeFlips. Tools like Card Uploader, that's one of them. There's probably a dozen different ones. And then some of the different Fujitsu scanners and all these things. You can take a stack of 500 raw cards in an hour. You can get them scanned, AI tool assistance, creating the listings, pulling the title, pulling the name from the listings, having pre-filled descriptions and all that based on the scan. You can start with a pile of raw cards, and you can have 500 listings done in an hour. It's absolutely crazy what can be done today. So yeah, like the binder lot that I used to buy 12 years ago, I used to buy, and I'd take maybe like Pareto principle. I'd take the 20% of cards that would comprise 80% of the value, and I would process those. Some would go for grading, some would go right to eBay, listed as raw near mint, raw LP, raw HP, whatever they were.
And so if people out there don't know, whoever ends up watching this video, a quick thing. I mentioned like sniping tools. Dan's talking about ways in which he's like sped up his business. Everything we say here, you could type it into YouTube and there'll be explanation. So if you don't know what we're talking about, depending on where you're at in your journey, look it up. I don't know who you like, Dan, if you can recommend someone for, automating, or speeding up sort of those types of processes, but I think you can probably just type it into YouTube at this point and anything.
That's one thing that's different from 12 years ago too. Yeah. I don't even know all the names. Like I haven't manually created an eBay listing in over a year at this point. I do consults with people. I'm aware of the tools. I at some point, like I should use them firsthand for a little bit, but no, the speed at which you can become educated, and that was actually one thing. Let me get this pulled back up on the other screen over here. Educate yourself. Depending on your familial situation and all that. When I was a teenager, I went to college for 4 years, and I lived with my parents when I was back from school, and I lived with my parents for a year after graduation. If you have the familial situation where you essentially have no living expenses, the way that it was for me, and again, not everyone has this, I know this. I paid for my car payment. I paid for my car insurance. I didn't have to pay for any groceries. I didn't have to pay for any rent or anything like that. The roof was over my head, and the food was in my belly, and that was all covered by mom and dad until I was 25 when I moved out. 23 when I moved out. 23 when I moved out. So for like a year and a half after college graduation. But so yeah, knowing your expenses, knowing all that stuff, getting the bare minimum met, and then above and beyond that, doing the math, doing the numbers, and figuring out what you need to scale.
And what I would just like add into that, going back to something I said, Dan, is that I think it's really important to either lower your expenses, as Dan's talking about, being, and I said too, like living at home, or taking another job outside of Pokemon. Like if you're fresh out of high school, you really don't get yourself in this situation where you're needing the profits from your fledgling Pokemon business. All of your profits need to be going back into the Pokemon business. So if you have $10,000 to start, you gotta be like, I'm not gonna touch any money from Pokemon for a year, for 2 years ideally, and let that money grow and grow your inventory. And in order to do that, you have to, because I see so many people they get kind of stuck in a sort of, they make $30,000 to $40,000 a year type place, and their inventory never gets bigger and their business never gets bigger because they're needing that money to live on, which is like very respectable and totally understandable. But it's a difficult position to be in. And in the long run, if the market takes downturns, if they want some upward trajectory in their life, they're going to get into a sticky position where it's hard to move on to kind of the next step. Yeah, there's some good comments here about RuneScape and some other things that are completely correct.
I just definitely. I put that one on the screen. I just realized I had the PokeFlips background, but I went to the non PokeFlips background now. Honestly, said mostly as a meme, but I did a lot of my first flipping in life, buying unids, buying unidentified herbs at Valley East Bank, and buying lobsters and all different kinds of stuff. Learning how to avoid scams in Gielinor. Don't fall for the armor trimmers because they exist in the Pokemon space as well. But yeah,
I built my first business with other people in RuneScape with my friends who were part of like a mining guild. We were making cannonballs, and I had like 4 or 5 people doing different parts of it. And yeah, first ever.
Very good times. But yeah, getting all the education stuff out of the way, and honestly, you can watch so many videos, but at some point, like, you do have to take action. Be cautious with the action that you take, but ideally, learn through other people's mistakes. Watch a bunch of the videos out there. Don't like treat any one individual, myself included, Jake included, as if they're spewing gospel, as if they have the infallible word. Especially if you have a lot of time, consume content from a lot of different people. Follow people who run a bulk business. Follow people who do vendor POV. Follow people who do buying, grading, selling. Little bit of every. And there's so many great channels out there. I actually, not to the extent that you don't consume PokeTube, but over the past like couple months, I've been consciously, I consume 80% less PokeTube than I did a few months ago.
So I would say something maybe similar but slightly different. So I would say, and again, from my experience on YouTube and what I've seen out there, that there are people who have actually built businesses and had success and are talking about things that they know about. And then there's people who are speculating on the future value, like the sort of investment side of the hobby. Anyone from the investment side of the hobby that comes out and says, this or that, that's the stuff you really have to take. You have to be really, really cautious and careful with. Now, that being said, people who talk about their own businesses, right? Like, it doesn't mean that it's the right thing for you to do, obviously. Mm-hmm. But there are, and we'll get into investing and speculating and long-term and things like that. And I do think, I think knowing data, following trends and patterns, following long-term patterns and trends, studying other hobbies. Like, I am a big investor in Pokemon, and we can talk about that. But that's where I would really be cautious. Is anyone who is talking about investing, in general, and anyone who's guaranteeing or talking with any sort of confidence around there. And to me, that would just be like a whole, it doesn't mean you can't listen to their arguments and understand their ideas, because their ideas might be valuable, but take that, and most of these people, they have businesses in Pokemon, and they're actively selling, like, they're actively own these things and are selling it to you. I don't need to say this to Dan's channel. I know most people here know that, but people who run the biggest auction houses in the world selling hundreds of millions of dollars of this stuff, coming on to YouTube or going other places and telling people that Pokemon's a great investment. That's silly, right? Like, They have no, like, now could they say, well, Pokemon's really hot and we're making a lot of money selling Pokemon, absolutely. But just be careful. And now people analyzing what makes a great investment in collectibles and what makes investments succeed for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, and what other pop culture collectibles have succeeded, over those time frames. That's interesting to listen to, and can improve your odds, I suppose.
Yep. But yeah, as Jake said, and I'll add to it a bit too, is like the networking and everything. I think you'll watch the vendor POVs, you'll see the Bulbastors and the Jar Chomps and the Uyamas, and you'll see all those big numbers and the RJ's collectibles. And but I only did this myself in the past 3 months. I live in upstate New York. There are shows almost every month in Albany, in Syracuse, in Rochester, in Buffalo. Like if they're within 90 minutes of me where I live, go check out, and especially kid out of high school, you got all the time in the world, go to every LGS within an hour of you. I was shocked to find that I have 12 LGSs within an hour of me, approximately. And look for, and I've said this before too, and I have a hard time articulating it. Don't try to meet people to figure out how you can use them to climb them as if they're a ladder to further yourself. Like, try to create genuine connections with other human beings, and then if you guys can create some kind of win-win relationships, that's great, because that's what Jake and I have done together. That's what I've done with all the independent contractors, and Jake's got his whole team going too from the same vein. So don't take it the wrong way that I'm saying it like this, but go put yourself out there, meet a lot of people, and just naturally you'll end up running into people in the space where you guys just have strengths that can kind of be cohesive and work together, or you've got excess of X and he needs that, and you're able to like be a supplier, or someone can be a supplier for you. I know like Retro, a close friend in the space, talks about this too. He runs Japanese wholesale, and he has somebody local that they just need functionally infinite Japanese product to funnel into their live streams, and sourcing was a bottleneck for them. Well, he's been, over the past several years, he'd call himself a dust collector. He was very well attuned to how to source from Japanese websites, and I think he has somebody who's like a relative over in Japan as well. And he used his strength to meet the void, to service the void of local business to him. And that's like a massive portion of his business. Tons of GMV, tons of net revenue, net profit for him. And it's a win-win. I mean, he sources it. He cures that bottleneck for that business. And so go to every LGS, see what they're selling, see what they're not selling. Maybe chat with them. See if they do they grade. Do they have binder collections that they just brought in that they're pricing to put out in the case? You can pay, like, hey, I'll pay 105% of market on everything, but I'm going to be picky and choosy on what I'm going to buy. And you just buy the things with an 80% or higher likelihood of PSA 10ing. I think a lot of people get lost on, like, I want a recipe. I want to bake a very profitable cake that is a Pokemon business. I want to do step 1, do step 2, do step 3, and just have this 8-figure Pokemon business. A lot of times it doesn't really work like that, because your strengths and weaknesses, geographically, personally, financially, all those things will be very different from everyone else's, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think bringing people ideas, just to follow up on that, bringing, making content with people, like for my cousin, meet people your age doing this, start hanging out with them, to follow up with Dan, make content with them, do like split a collection with them. You only each have 5,000, buy the $10,000 collection together, work on splitting it up, starting to build those friendships, those relationships, get to know them. This is a hobby built on interpersonal relationships. It's a business built on interpersonal relationships. There's tons of sales and marketing and jobs that require, lots of those types of connections, outward facing, that it can be really useful to develop those skills yourself or find people who can develop those skills. And then on the inside, like, you need people who are skilled and can grind and work really hard. There are people who may have very low skills in those areas or very low interest in any of those areas, but they're really good at like working for 12 hours pre-grading cards and shipping out cards and willing to kind of do that work and have a good sort of math mind, and they're able to do good bookkeeping or something like that. So, figure out your strengths, weaknesses, that type of thing. Try to partner with other people to help balance that out. Yeah, all that stuff is always good. So going back to the just starting out, Dan. So I said what I would do. Where would you start your business today with $10,000? And let's say how we get from 10,000 to 100,000. Let's say in overall inventory / cash. Maybe even give a little breakdown on what your cash to inventory, breakdown might look as you grow. Obviously, it's super dependent on what collections come your way, which is going to be part of my answer, right?
Yeah.
But your sort of ideal and what that first 100,000 might look like, and then I'll add to what I said up to that 100,000. But I already started talking about that a bit. So why don't you go?
Yeah, presuming a cost basis of zero, or living expenses of zero, which many people graduating high school have it. Again, some people don't have that whatsoever, and it's going to be significantly more difficult if you need to make $4,000 a month and pull out $4,000 a month to pay your bills and whatever. But minimize those expenses as much as possible. But yeah, starting day zero, I would you said this a little bit, and I'll go a little bit deeper. I would join Discords. I would join all the local Facebook Marketplace groups. I would create a YouTube channel and a TikTok and an Instagram, and I would document the journey. I saw, I don't know if he's still in here, but I saw like DJ's Poke Center in here. I've been on his channel. So many people in the space, myself, Jake included, DJ's Poke Center included, are just nerds that love to geek out over this stuff and chat Pokemon all the time. And this 17-year-old high school kid is in a very, very common situation. I think a lot of people aspire to one day run a Pokemon business. So it is great to go watch the Bulbasaur. It is great to go watch Garchomp, guys who are killing it, doing at a massive high level. But another bit of content that is extremely compelling for people in that space is this guy is starting from where I'm at. It's relatable because I'm going to watch this guy like do exactly what I could be doing. It's more relatable. So I would say document it all. It's literally free. It costs time, but when you have all the time and less capital, document it. It's going to cost you nothing. You might meet great people. You never know what's going to come of it. But yes, same route as you. eBay is universal. Everyone, at least in the United States, has access to the same eBay. And so eBay is there. But yeah, in the past 2 months, I've gone to probably 6 local shows, and I would go to every LGS within an hour. So week 1, month 1, I would go to every LGS within an hour, scope them out, see what they have, see what they need. And I'm a business too, and this is going to be a little bit of self promo, I guess. But like Retro exists. Let me use Retro too, because he's not me, and I don't have an affiliate thing. This is just shouting a homie out. Every day on Instagram, Retro posts a Japanese sell list. If you go to an LGS and you don't see any Japanese product there, maybe you can just middleman product from someone like Retro. They're an LGS that's been around for a while. They've never supplied the product. They're just afraid of getting it. Hey, maybe you spend $1,000 with Retro, and he requires that you have your DBA, your sales tax certificate, all that stuff. Maybe you just buy $1,000 of stuff from Retro and you sell it to an LGS who will pay you $1,050. You make 5% for just doing a relatively low risk thing. And so if that's something relatively easy to do. I do. Is this my latest one? This is my latest one. I buy all these packs. Maybe you walk into your LGS and like, oh, hey, there's this guy Dan on YouTube, and every week he needs Black Flare and White Bolt, Black Bolt and White Flare right now. You might walk into an LGS somewhere across the country. You might log into your Facebook Marketplace. You might see somebody who just bought it out some major drop of Black Bolt, and they don't like Pokemon. They're just looking to dump them. They might be selling Black Bolt for $9 a pack. You might be able to buy 300 packs of Black Bolt for $9 a pack, and then just flip them to me and make $500-600 net profit. So again, like I'm going to be fairly broad because everyone's circumstance is different. Everyone has access to different things. eBay is kind of like the universal. Everyone could potentially do that. That's their card uploader. But
It's okay,
all
Dan.
the
This is
other,
just you. This is just what you would do.
but this is what I would do. Yeah, like this is what I would do. And again, like I have been to my LGSs. I have been to my local shows. Um, some of the things have been there. I actually recently too. So this was me using my own hot buy list. There was a time 6-8 weeks ago maybe I was very low on Paldean Fates for the live streams. In one singular day with less than $10,000, I functionally profited over $1,500. I forget what the exact number was, but I was paying, say it was $20 on Paldean Fates. Uh, the amount of tools and resources out there. There's a website out there called priceperpack.net. It's just let me actually share it while we're talking about it. It's unaffiliated. It's just a type of thing that exists and someone created. And I needed Paldean Fates. So you go to Scarlet and Violet, you go to Paldean Fates. I saw that there were tech sticker collections that were functionally $15 a pack when the booster packs were, what are booster packs right now? 25.89. So like any other data compiler, this is probably old data. You probably actually can't go out there and find right now. You probably like this probably goes to TCG Player and it calls the market price 542. There will be zero listings for 542. But one thing that I found was somebody had listed like 50 cases of these on eBay. So they must have gone to TCG Player, checked out what the market price was, and they went and they listed them. And I bought over 10 grand worth for me. I had PK and Ponga buy a bunch because they were the ones that needed them for the live streams. But this is one of those things where like there is technology today that kind of does some of the work for me. And I just from time to time check in on different websites like that. Oh, hey, there's literally like anyone could have gone on eBay, spent 10 grand. And I know that's a lot of money. That would be your whole budget here. I wouldn't recommend spending your whole budget, but it paid over a 15% net margin instantly. Just, and anyone could have done, and I've had people do that before too. I put up a hot buy list for Black Bolt at $11 a pack. Hey Dan, can I drop ship to you from another thing? And I get 1,000 packs coming in that they just bought somewhere else for $10 a pack, and they made $1 a pack. So again, like it's weird for me to say that I would supply a guy like me, but I would. Like opportunity exists in so many places, and I would keep an eye out for things like that. My local shows, I would go to the local shows and I would see what people were after. I know this is a thing at Collecticon, and I saw it at some of the local shows too. I forget who the vendor was, but there's a vendor at like most Collecticons that is paying 100% of market on a certain subset of cards. I've seen that at some of my local shows. Hey, we're buying Celebrations Charizards at 100% of market. We're buying XYZ at 100% of market. Go buy the stuff for 85-90% of market off Facebook Marketplace. Flip it to them for an instant, quick 10-15%. There's just so much to do that it's hard to articulate in any singular thing like what I would do. But that's a long ranty walk through some of the things that I would look at.
So if we can try and distill those things though into like what is the specific play, right? Because what we're talking about is you're looking for plays, right, in different areas. You're looking for the old word play, right? You're looking for opportunities to arbitrage. We can just say that I'm trying to arbitrage. I'm trying to make a margin as quickly as possible, and I'm trying to do it, and replicate it as many times as possible. And so, from my perspective, the easiest way to do that for me was buying off of eBay, putting in lots of bid using the sniper bots, going to some local shows, depending on the environment of the local shows. To me, the local game stores, the starting to have a buy list or looking at other people's buy lists, to me, that's going to take more time for less reward initially. Do you agree, disagree with that, Dan? Where would you like in that? Because I'm not saying that's correct. This is just my experience of it is like I would start adding those things in when my thinking would be this. When I started having so much inventory that it was hard to list it all, myself and sell it all myself, I would start with doing the whole job. Buy from a
Yeah.
collector, sell to a collector. No, like do as much of that as you can. But then as you start to add in those wholesale things where you're going to start making less margin, you should start making less margin, but you're starting to increase your speed and your liquidity when you start adding in those wholesale. And what, again, this is just semantics, but what I mean by wholesale, for all intents and purposes, I think Dan calls it just business to business, probably is how he refers to it on this channel. It's the same concept usually, right? It's I'm wholesaling, I'm wholesaling items that, you know, I'm making some amount, I'm giving it to the next guy and they're going to piece it apart, or wholesale it to someone else, but you know, they're going to piece it apart and sort of make the full amount. And that becomes important to do when your time becomes more valuable. Now where you decide to make, like for Dan and I, we could probably do it fairly fast just because we have the knowledge and the experience. But the other thing you're doing during this period, right, is you're learning like what should you even be looking at? Like what cards should you be looking at? When you go to a show, when you buy collections, what are the popular cards that actually sell? Right. And I guess in our theory here, we already know that going into it. For my cousin, he's like starting to develop that knowledge. Unfortunately, and I've told him this, I don't think there's like a massive shortcut. I think you learn that by having conversations, by being a vendor, and by doing the end to end. You buy from collectors and sell to collectors. Because what you're really getting at is you're learning what do collectors like. You're spending your time trying to understand demand. What do collectors enjoy? What are collectors currently enjoying and liking? What are they willing to pay for these items? What are they actually willing to pay? Not what people online say they're going to pay, but are they actually buying them? How much of them are they actually buying? Right. And these are the things you experience when you're on the ground at shows and or you're on the ground on eBay. You know, I don't know why I'm using the ground comment, but like it's a grindy groundwork. People who are full-time eBay sellers, full-time, you know, doing it yourself, listing, seeing what's selling, seeing how long it takes to sell. All of those reps is what teaches you the skill that then I think you can apply that to some of the bigger, faster, quicker plays. Like why, like for Dan's buy list to work, he needs to have a person he's going to sell it to at the end. He needs to know how to wholesale it. He needs to have the reputation and following enough that there'll be enough visibility that it's like worth his time. And granted, it takes almost no time to do those, but let's say it took hours to do, you know, theoretically, right? There would need to be the payoff, right? Sort of that trade-off. And so don't do things like in the beginning, you do have a lot of time, but try to put your time into all things that are teaching you. Like don't shortcut. This would be my advice. Like try not to shortcut. Wholesaling can be dangerous. There are guys out there right now who know very little and they've done something where they just sell slabs to the repack sellers right now. Right. Yeah. And it's like, it's a great business, but it's stopped them from learning about anything else. And so if that opportunity slows down, stops, particularly when you're early on, getting that collector to collector will help you as you go, help you as you build a business, help you as you hire people. So, and you out there who's like doing that work, although it's hard, like those eBay sellers who are here doing like listing one after another, it's that type of stuff that you're then going to be able to be like, okay, how do I turn this into something? How do I scale this up? And that's when you start getting into that conversation of like, okay, who can I wholesale this to? You know, now maybe local game stores could go in that first 10,000. Maybe it goes somewhere between that 10,000 and 50,000. You know, it sounds like you had good experiences with that, Dan, and you would put it pretty close to the beginning. I think for me, that would be like 50,000 to 100,000. I'd probably start going, you know.
Yeah, and one thing that I didn't do back then, but I would do today if I started over, I would spend probably half the money, again, assuming all the living expenses were taken care of. I would probably try to spend the first $5,000 within the first month. You're gonna overpay on some things. You're gonna learn that when you buy a binder collection and you go to list it and you find out some of the conditions were worse than you expected. That's gonna be a very valuable teacher, though. But I would it sounds like a nightmare to do today. I wouldn't do it today, but I would do it if I was starting. I would have $5,000 in inventory. If you're only paying $50 for this show 20 minutes down the road, it is very reasonable to go to a show with only $5,000 in inventory. Hell, I mean, maybe even $2,500 in inventory. And if you sell, say you're buying at 80% and you're selling at 90 to 100%, I mean, you only need to sell $500 if you're making 10% margins on average to pay for the table. I mean, sell $1,000 and add in gas and buy yourself lunch. That's a pretty successful day because you learn through those experiences, through those engagements. And again, the part that I was saying where like it sounds like a nightmare to do today, I would have 5K in inventory. It would all be listed on eBay. And as the things sold, I'd have my $1 binder, my $2 binder, my $3 binder. As they sold, hey, I'm going to the show tomorrow. Maybe put my store on vacation mode for a day or two or whatever. And hey, I would keep a meticulous list. These 120 cards sold from my binders, from my top loader display or whatever, and I would pull all those listings off eBay that night, and I would have everything available everywhere, and I would just churn at that 10 to 15% margin ish, somewhere in there. And grading comes down the line, and maybe this is where you like, hey, I realize that I don't know what the market's going to do 6 months from now. That's scary. I don't want to take the risks myself because 10K is not enough capital to. Maybe you find somebody, maybe you create a relationship with somebody who just has that more in their wheelhouse, and maybe you don't get the full upside of that months down the line potentially, but maybe you find somebody, and I would be this person for some people. Maybe you find somebody who just pays you 110% of market on things that they are quite confident is going to PSA 10. So you just get that quicker liquidity and you get it plowed back into new things. Like that's one of those things that it's easy for me to say now. Day zero, you're not going to have that, but you might have that 2 weeks in if you put yourself out there enough and you find the right person, and you like it's very quickly it becomes impossible to say because like everyone's week 1, week 2, week 3 is going to be steered in different directions.
And that's part of why I love the local show for the time management piece, because you might go there and there's 3 of your local game stores all there. You might go there, and to Dan's point, you might meet the grader who is like the local grader who goes around to everyone's booths and picks out the PSA 10s, and you make a deal. Hey, I'm just going to put them aside for you. I'm going to save you time. I'm going to pick out the cards that I think are going to 10. We'll develop a relationship, and I'll just hand you that stack. You give me 110%, 120%. Or I even heard of people who do deals. Hey, let's split. If it comes back a 10, you'll pay me a little extra.
I've done that with people.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And I know some people who have like, now you have to really trust the person. Be careful with things like this, right? Like obviously, these things go slow with this type of stuff, and we can talk about safety and all those things. But yeah, to really get into the granular, because I think that's going to be the most value, and you start to get into it. So it's like, what types of cards are we actually buying and going? Maybe start with that first 10,000. So I am buying collections. Of course, I'm looking for potential hits that are above $500. But if I'm getting a $500, if I'm getting any card over $500, it better sell real fast. Like it better be, I better know exactly. I'm not just going to list this on eBay and hope it sells at some point, particularly in a hot environment where things are super volatile. So when environments are really hot like this, you can certainly feel it. Like, oh, it's trending up, it's trending down. But the truth is like, it can be trending up 1 month and then trending down the next month and then trending way up again. But what does happen in environments like this is there's quite a bit of volatility. And so when there's a lot of volatility, you have to hedge more as a business. If you're smart, you have to understand, you have to assess the risk. There's an increased amount of risk. And so you have to assess that in what you're doing. And so buying items that you can move fast, that you can hedge the risk across a number of different types of items. You can hedge the risk in items, to Dan's point, $1 to $5 cards, they sell 1 to 5. Like just because that TCG player $2 card has gone from $2 to $1.50, it's going to sell for $2 at the same show.
Yeah.
So they're whereas that $500 card, if that goes to 300, good luck selling it for 500 at that show. Right. So if you have 200 of those $2 cards, You're not going to lose any money. They're going to still sell at the exact same amount, but that $500 card you're gonna take a loss on. It's going to be hard to move, hard to sell. So what I would do, Dan, I would create binders. I would create a vending inventory.
Yep.
And then that same vending inventory, I would start to list that on eBay, and I prioritize by the most expensive things on eBay. And I would prioritize by the nichest things on eBay, the stuff that I thought I would have the hardest time to vend.
Yep.
And the only reason I would have anything that would be even a little niche is because I'm getting it at 40%, 50%. So ideally, everything you should be buying should be like this should be great in my inventory, in my case. But if you're buying collections, large collections, they're going to be mixed up, right? You should be buying those collections at 50% when 70% of the collection is highly easy, awesome stuff. And that last 30% is a little bit more difficult. Now with that last 30%, list it on eBay, wider audience, list it low. Don't be afraid to sell something under market, particularly as you're starting off, tactically to get that money to then buy the next collection. Focus your money
back and
focus your money into the things that actually move. And this is something that I talk a lot with my guys in my business, even today. Take losses. Take calculated strategic losses. They're not really losses. They're losses in a specific transaction, but we had to do that transaction because we got that card, because we got 1,000 other cards, hundreds of other cards around it that we're doubling our money on. Mm-hmm. It's all math. It's difficult to do. Try to take the emotions out of it. Try to take the ego and pride out of it. Try to take your perfection. I have a perfectionistic brain sometimes where I like to be perfect on everything. And trying to be perfect on everything, you can be less perfect overall. you can hurt sort of the long-termness. So that's what I would say. So I'd really try as much as I can, right? Have 70% of that really super excellent liquid inventory. Now, what will happen from your first $10,000 to $50,000, your inventory is going to get worse and worse as you build it up, because your best stuff is going to sell immediately always and then help you get the capital. And so one thing you're going to be managing in that first 50,000 to 100,000 is how to move all of it and then reduce. Yeah, exactly. Like you start with 10, you get it up to 40. You may have to sell that 40 for 30, change it into 30,000 of really good inventory to then get to 50 to 60. Don't be afraid of going back from an inventory market sense, because really what market prices don't show you is liquidity, and liquidity is that secret skill and that secret sauce that I think new people struggle with and underestimate. And moving and people misunderstand, because sometimes really expensive items are the most liquid items, because you can sell $5,000 in one card if it's a super liquid card. So it's not just like trade in from higher dollar to lower dollar. There is no simple rule, right? There was a month period where ponchos, I could put 4 ponchos out on my table. There were a 3-month period this year that I could put PSA 10 gold stars and I would get 20% over the last sold on market if I put them out on my table immediately. Yeah. You learn, right, being able to liquidate immediately $50,000 is amazing, right? So learning how to do that, what cards will do that, what's hot right then, moving with the market, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then, as far as vintage, modern, ideally you're doing everything. Ideally you're learning, because you want to learn everything. You want to be able to handle everything. But of course you want to make sure that whatever you're dealing in, vintage, modern, middle era, that it's as much popular Pokemon as possible, as much popular sets, recognizable sets, and you're getting it in front of the right audience, the right people. Anything specific in there, Dan, talking about from like 10,000 maybe to 50,000, kind of what you're looking at as far as inventory management? Are you starting to add in that first 10 to 50 or 50 to 100? Are you starting to add in any consignments on your end or any of your other things? When do you start thinking about adding in some of these other things, you think, if you were to do it again?
Again, like I know it serves as a frustration for some people, like the whole "it depends" answer. It's the answer to everything. But one of the reasons that it is I just don't know what people you will meet. Again, if you know a guy who runs a very profitable Whatnot live stream and he's able, or he or she is able to rip packs at 120% of market, you might just find somebody who, every time a pack comes up to you, every time a collection box comes up to you, do the quick math on what the packs break down to. You might be able to have just like, and I've told this to my neighbor too. A lot of people who follow my channel, you've probably heard the name Ethan a lot. So Ethan dates the daughter of my neighbor, and I tell him, I'm like, Ethan, I am your infinite liquidity pool. I pay these percentages on X, Y, and Z. He's able to go out sometimes and buy $3,000 to $5,000 worth of slabs at 75, 80%, knowing that I am buying those specific things that week at 80, 85%, whatever the number is. So again, like over that first 2 months, over that growth from 10 to 25 to 50,000, learn the people around you, learn what their needs are, learn who's looking for what. And there are times some people might not fully understand this, and because a lot of people say, like, what percentage should I pay, what percentage should I make? It depends. It depends on how likely and how concrete. Like if I put up a pack buy list for Black Bolt on Monday, and you send me a DM and you say, Dan, I have the opportunity to get 2,000 packs of this set, and I am solid. I am buying those. I am guaranteed liquidity. I am a guaranteed out on this quantity of those packs. You might be fine making 2%. If you can buy $5,000 of something and it's just boom, boom, done, over with, fully insured, no risk, all that stuff. That's where sometimes people get lost. What percentage should I make? What percentage should I pay? It depends on how concrete your ability to move it. And a lot of my business today is like instant liquidity. There are times where I'm buying things at 88% of market, knowing that today, the day that I buy it, I have it sold at 90%.
So even with your knowledge, though, so much of that is about the relationships, right?
Yeah,
like it's about right. And so I think it's two conversations. And correct me if this is wrong, but it's really important because like what Dan is saying, I completely agree with that. The whole time you're building up an engine, like a money-making engine, you're looking for new, faster, quicker engines that can come from anywhere, right? So you're building up a traditional engine, right, Dan? A traditional engine that anyone can do, which is like going onto eBay and then selling those cards on eBay. Anyone can do it. But anyone can't sell to retro. Anyone can't sell to, this person you met at a local game store, that needs a certain thing, or the streamers in your hometown, right? Once you develop those relationships and you find those things, then, okay, now Dan knows anytime he gets this item, he can send it to that person and make 5%, right? And then Dan's obviously made relationships with big businesses, which we can get into and talk about it, right? That's the best, right? The bigger the business, the less likely, hopefully, they're going to fail. One, and because the danger, right, of relying on your local streamer is your local streamer may be out of business in 3 months, or he may have to raise his prices, or he may lose part of his audience, and now he can't afford to buy from you anymore, right? Partnering with Fanatics, partnering with eBay, partnering with some of these bigger guys who are making larger investments, right? This goes into this sort of the conversation around having lots of skills and avenues and not being dependent on any single one. And to Dan's point, efficiency of all those avenues. Dan's able to have 10 avenues because he clicks a button on each avenue, and then he can move. He's like, okay, I built up this avenue. Now this avenue runs with me just like an hour a week. Now I can have this new avenue.
When Troll and Toad Evo closes and I'm not 100% all in on that, I can pivot it elsewhere.
Right.
Yeah, there's so many layers to it all. It can seem daunting, but really, I think a lot of it comes back to buying that first binder after you're sales tax exempt, after you have a separate business bank account, separate business credit card, buying that first collection, going through the motions. Like you could spend 1,000 hours consuming PokeTube content. You should do XYZ. You should do this. You should do that. You should just do something, try something, buy that first binder collection, buy that first Facebook marketplace. I used to buy on Craigslist all the time, and it was very fruitful. Buy that first thing, go through the motions of creating your first eBay listings. Go vend your first show. Maybe you spend $50 and you only have $300 worth of cards and a couple binders. And but like some of the like I went and I bought from some of those vendors. I bought from people who were vending for the first time. I was there with my son. We were mostly targeting dollar card binders to build out my son's Pokédex collection, and just cool conversations with a lot of people. Yeah.
So how are you managing your capital from that 10,000 to 50,000? How much am I putting into these binder collections weekly? What is my goal in terms of how fast am I flipping? Are there any details you can give the audience for people who might be, because I think that's where a lot of for the people who are starting to do that already, where the value might be. And it's a hard thing to answer, I know, but does anything kind of come up I think, because your point is absolutely right that like so much of it depends on your situation. And if a situation presents itself where the math makes sense, Dan and I repeat over and over again, the math is follow the math. Don't follow. Yeah. Well, Jake said buy dollar cards. It's like not if the math, like if you have an opportunity to buy a big card that you think is going to grade a PSA 10 and then you can wholesale it immediately, always do that, right? Always. Yeah. Better margin, faster, always. But where are they most likely to find that, I guess, is the question, and how to manage that piece.
Yeah, I'll keep the prerequisites to a minimum, but like that underlying assumption is massive. Like this is extra separate money that you don't need to live on. So from 10 to 50 to 100, whatever the number is, I would try to have 60 to 80% of it in most of the time. I would be ready to change that if and when needed. One thing that I always say that is just like a rule to live by, whether you have $5,000 or $5 million, don't go broke on good deals and then make yourself be unable to take advantage of a great deal. That's kind of a vague thing to say, but I think people understand what I'm saying. If you buy, hey, I've got 10 grand. If you spend 10 grand on the first day, because like, oh, I can make 5% on this, I can make 8% on this. The day that you see that eBay auction ending and it's a binder that's going for 2,500 and you just like your credit cards, whatever it is, your capital's tapped, you don't have the ability, and then it goes for 50% of market. So again, everyone's threshold is going to be a little bit different here, but go deeper when the presumed profit affords itself to where like you think it'll be more worthwhile. But generally speaking, I would try to have 60 to 80% of my money at least back into the business. Probably the lower capital that I had. And this is something that I've done over the past 12 years. I've always had, and I've been bad at obeying it. I've always had like a minimum liquidity goal. When I started in the hobby back in 2014, I allocated $5,000 towards everything. My minimum liquidity goal, I always wanted to have $1,000 cash because it's like at any time $1,000 collection could pop up and I could buy it. So I guess quick math there, 20% of my total working capital, I wanted to have liquid cash for whatever opportunity presented itself to me. We could go into the conversations as long as you're the right individual. Credit cards can be something that like they can be the worst thing for you. They can bankrupt you. Don't pay interest on a credit card, all that good stuff. But like to smooth out cash flow, I've dipped into credit cards and to smooth out cash flow over the past 12 years. It's a great interest-free tool to actually allow yourself to spend a little bit over your 10K, knowing that the cash flow is there to get it back and paid off. But when I got up to where I snowballed to 50K, my liquidity goal was probably 10K. Now that I have 7 figures worth of inventory, my liquidity goal is still approximately, I'm terrible at maintaining it, but my liquidity goal has almost always been about 20% of like my total value of inventory ish, 10 to 20%. As the number gets substantially bigger, the percentage gets a little bit smaller. I'm probably closer to like a 10% liquidity goal now. And there's so many great deals left and right that I have a hard time maintaining my liquidity goal. I've kind of like a common theme amongst the past 12 years. I just find so many things to buy that I know I can make margin on that I'm like always spending down to that last, but this is spending to the last cent. while having my buckets filled, while having everything else taken care of. So it's like not literally spending my rent money, not spending my grocery money on Pokemon. And like, so when I say spending my last cent, it's my last cent of money allocated towards this.
So I am way more aggressive than Dan, particularly in that first 10 to 100,000. And particularly, and again, we're imagining, and again, that doesn't mean I'm right or Dan's right? Like, just understanding that people do different things, and you can hear our reasoning, and you can see that there's generally reasoning behind most things we do. You know, with some exceptions when we go to the casino and we let reason. But usually Dan and I have some sort of math defense, even if we're deluding ourselves to what we're doing. But so for me, in that first 10 to 100,000, I am often maxing out credit cards. And using the amounts that I'm making, that I'm then pushing myself to sell collections to pay off those credit cards. And I'm doing my very, very best to never, pay interest. But if I have to pay interest once in a while, I'm okay with paying some amount of interest. And I'm also working on getting my credit cards as high as possible. And my credit cards are for the big, fast purchases that I deem as very close to automatic wins. And what I mean by that is I have a buyer and a seller basically lined up. I'm moving it over immediately. So there have been a couple times, like one time, I think, do you remember, Dan, when I called you? I did this once on a $700,000 deal.
Oh, yeah.
And I called Dan, right? And it was like, okay, I'm going to make a few $100,000 on this deal. Okay. If I can liquidate this all in 2 weeks, I have the capital to cover most of this, but not all of it. So and this is doing that on a massive scale, but you can do that on a $30,000 collection if you have only $10,000, right? So putting things on credit cards, even taking cash advances on credit cards, like this is stuff that not everyone's going to tell you, but if my degree of certainty is really high, I would never invest or speculate on credit cards. You are not investing because you have some sort of crystal ball and you can tell what these products are going to do in the next few years. That's not what we're doing. I am buying something for my business and putting it into the engine that moves it very fast and very quickly. I think that low interest loans, even talking to your family and getting low interest loans from family, low interest loan from a bank, like you are a business person, you are operating a business. This is not, you are taking calculated risks within a business. But again, you got to really know what you're doing and I would make sure you have a proven track record and that people you're buying and selling to are solid. Because if Dan was kind of flaky, he wouldn't have been a good option for me then, right? Because all the time people are like, okay, this guy's going to buy 100,000 from me, and then they back out and you're screwed. Okay. So you have to make sure the people you're dealing with, and when you're dealing with these larger buys that are sort of outside the scope of what you can afford, making sure that you have those things in place. Now, I think taking cash advances on your credit cards and being able to pay, even because people will often only want cash for a variety of reasons, which we don't need to go into, but and paying that 3%, 5% fee, whatever it is well worth it when you can double your money in a week. And there are going to be those opportunities, if you're good, where you can turn $10,000 into $30,000 in 4 days, in 5 days. I get one or two of those a year. Grinding. And you need to take those opportunities, and you shouldn't save money for those opportunities, in my opinion. Again, these are just my opinions, because it's so hard to predict when those opportunities are going to come. You just need to make sure that you're going to be able to take them when they come. Now, by using credit cards and or friends. So here's another great way to do it. Call a friend who has money or who's in the hobby, split it with a family member. I take consults, and still to this day on this topic a lot, and both Dan and I have a Patreon. We also do consulting, and like there's this massive collection. I think I can make a lot of money. What should I do? And what I say is like, here's what I would do. And again, I am taking risk, calculated risk, but not doing it is also taking risk. This is something that people don't understand.
Yep.
What Dan is doing theoretically, if he's being really cautious, he's also taking risk in the opposite way, which is not taking advantage of those things, which is slowing down his business. Now, at his stage in his life, it's no risk because Dan has enough to live on, right? So, and Dan and I talk a lot about, but early on, if you only had 5,000, if you only had 10,000, and you needed to eventually help support your family, you not taking those risks is actually putting your family at risk. I would debate and argue. And so the calculus shifts and changes depending on where you're at, but there is again, if I'm doing that, you should not be borrowing to invest is a very dangerous pattern. Investing should be when you have so much profits that you can't put it back into your business. And we'll get to that. It's the opposite. It's like, I have income that I just want to make passive. But running your business, in my opinion, is different. And I think you can be much, much more aggressive, particularly if you have a really good business. And again, people that's how most businesses are started in this country, is people taking business loans, large loans for businesses that are way worse and are way more risky than arbitraging these items to there. So that would be what I would. And then adding in, you can make a lot of money off of credit cards, buy cash back, get good credit cards. Add those into what you do. Dan and I both do that a bunch. And so I guess if that encourages you to take calculated risks, let it. I would encourage that. But understand we're in a very volatile period. So be very careful buying that $30,000 collection right now, because depending on what's in it and what percentage you're getting it at, that could be worth $15,000 in 2 weeks from now. Right, those cards could fall, or it could be worth 60,000. We have no idea, but if you can buy it at 50% and you lock in sales to streamers, and you're going to make that money automatically, and you trust everyone involved, I personally am doing that every single time, and I'm going to try to do it every day. And that's honestly how I've grown as fast as I've grown, is that I have leveraged in a calculated way every cent that I have. Every investment, everything, always all in on things that when the asymmetric risk reward is really, really in my favor. That would be my spiel.
Yeah. One thing I'll add too, I guess there's two things. There's talk and there's walk. I say the liquidity goals that I've held, and I would say overall, generally speaking, I was pretty decent at maintaining my liquidity goal, 10 to 20% of my. Today, the buckets overflow, all that good stuff, financial independence, coast fire, whatever name you want to call it. I'm there, and then some. I have a $250,000 Chase line of credit that I got back in January, I want to say, and it's not spent too much. It spent more time with money on it than entirely paid off. And just like literally as we speak, I have 6 figures of cards that I bought at a pretty high percentage. Most cards that you're buying $5,000-$10,000 plus. I have over $100,000 worth of cards that I bought fully on my risk, that I literally bought at a percentage. They're ending this Sunday on Fanatics. I did the risk calculation. I've done the math, and this is something that I started probably a little.
Never punished, baby. Never punished.
Over the past 12 years, I've done it several times to different levels, and I've just taken a stab. It's like I think this card in the short to intermediate term. One very public example that I made a YouTube video on, and this was more platform arbitrage than like the price actually moving. Landry Pop auctions a year ago had tons of crazy stuff ending. I bought a PSA 10 first edition Venusaur, base set first edition Venusaur from Landry Pop auctions for like $18,000 to $18,000 to $20,000. It was roughly the same time that Black Label Burger Chew went for like 22 grand or whatever. I literally took it from Landry Pop auctions. I thought going over the next 2-3 months, I thought base first was going to kind of move up, and I took a gamble to some extent. I was right. It did go up. I sold that card like 60 to 90 days later for like $50,000 or $60,000. And I over time I've done that
Like
to various extents.
but
And
like most of that's luck, right? I mean, we can say to people like there's
some of that's platform, most of that's luck.
but 5% of that profit, 10% of that profit is probably yours making a calculated decision. Because I do that.
And the rest of it's just dumb luck, market moving up. Like,
yeah, exactly. And I think everyone needs to hear that because,
yeah,
and Dan and I have made so much money off of luck and off of the market continuing to go up. But we're also compounding that by doing the smart things and doing the smart things over and over and over again. I would say that like I certainly have made more money on luck than I've made on skill and ability during this boom, but I've also made a lot of money on skill and ability, and it's helped me make exponentially more off the luck because I've had a lot more money to make the plays. So making the sure things then puts me in a position and to then take those risks, those asymmetric risks, and then potentially get lucky. You know, and I think Dan wouldn't buy the cards he's buying right now if he didn't have so much extra capital, and his income is probably so high right now that the risk, like the risk scenario is sort of like, well, let's say it goes badly, I'm going to make that back off of all of my things in 3 months or 2 months or a month, you know?
yeah.
So it's, and I have $2 million in other assets sitting in the bank. So if I'm risking $100,000, I'm 20 to 1 covered on those assets. Plus I make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in Pokemon income on top of it, right? There's all these things. And so when you're starting off with that 5 to 50, understanding you're working to get to that point, but you're not at that point yet, right? So you're, you know, so okay, so you're looking for those opportunities, but in that 5 to 50, obviously they're going to have to be more of a sure thing. Obviously, buying a lot of cards and just auctioning them off randomly. I'm joking.
I have a lot of segments to my business.
Yeah.
One other reason that I got the line of credit is like, again, I have relationships with different platforms, and some of them I have the opportunity to sell in at a very high percentage. In the past month, I've also bought just $200,000 worth of high-end cards that I paid handsomely on. I paid in the low mid 90% on. I needed the capital. That's where I used the Chase line of credit. I put $200K on the Chase line of credit. I paid 8% for a month, in which time I bought it and I just moved it over here. I already had the buyer locked down at a fixed margin, couple percent, make a couple percent on $200,000. And it takes an hour worth of work. Like, that's a very good effective hourly rate.
Yeah, no. And all joking aside, just to put out, like, there's also all sorts of secondary things for Dan. His relationship with Fanatics, him building up, like, him keeping himself in good standing. Like, there's all sorts of secondary, third. Dan's very good at having secondary and third reasons to do something that put him. It's be very difficult for any of these things to be a negative for him. Like, even if these things were break evens, he's actually still making money because he's using credit cards, because he's going through Fanatics and building his relationship there and getting better fees and getting better pushes for his streaming, right? It all feeds on itself. Now, because we've gotten so lucky, like, we also are just making so much money from, like, just being in the space right now. It's hard to tease some of that out, but I do think, correct me if this is wrong, but I think you and I really try not to let that affect our decision making. We try and don't expect that. I don't expect that. Like, I don't ever operate with the expectation that the market's going to go up, personally. I always operate with the expectation that the market is going to either move 20% up, 20% down, be about the same within the next few months. Like, that's always where I'm.
That's where the bid that I placed, like, looking at the market at the time that I placed that bid, I felt like the Venusaur should have been 25 grand. I felt like I was actually bidding 80% of market. It was a poor platform to auction that card on. So I thought that I had, and that's fairly arbitrary. A lot of that was vibes based. A lot of that was like the data was, I forget what all the exact comps were. But anyways, I placed a bid, and I just thought the additional eyes of Fanatics, the additional name and brand of me and Fanatics, it's like, I think I can get, I pay some fee to Fanatics, obviously. It's like, I think I can get this much margin, just taking the card from here to here. I also underlying, there's some odds the card goes up. There's some odds the card and market goes down over the same time frame. But that's where it comes into, this is a little bit more gambly, but like the asymmetric upside, it's a crazy thing to say, but it's like the card can only go down 90% reasonably in 2 or 3 months, right? In this insane market that we're in, it's like there's some, I attributed some percent chance that I was going to triple my money. And the chance of me tripling my money was significantly higher, in my opinion, at the time, than the odds of me losing 90% of my money. I could have stomached losing 90% of my money. I attributed this much percent to that. Doubling, tripling my money was an outsized percentage chance of happening. And it just so happens that I more than doubled, nearly tripled my money.
Yeah, I think that's very dangerous advice. So just take
okay,
that.
That's not advice. That now we're at the point of me saying something crazy thing that I did a year ago.
Well, so what I'm going to say is this, right? So I think it's safe to say that Dan and like I have made so much more money in my investing this year than I've made in my Pokemon business, and I've done no work for my investing. Okay.
Yeah.
But I attribute that to a lot of luck, and we'll get into that in sort of the next section as we get bigger. I'm a very firm believer. So that card that you bought for 18,000, just a few months before it was going for 14,000 and then 12,000, and it was down at 9,000 at one point, right? So it went from 9,000 to 18,000. And so that's a card that, of course, if you're buying it at 80%, this is a very specific example. And two, this is not Dan's business. This is one of like 15 things he's doing, right? At 20 things, 30 things he's doing. It's just like, it's almost like for fun too. It's like a gamble because he has the money just and it's fun and it's like enjoyable also. And right. And like there's so many things that Dan does that are like what I would call is just sort of like very solid, repeatable engines that don't require like predicting movement on cards or demand. But something like this, so I think everyone's brains are basically rotted in the Pokemon space because of the last 6 years, like anyone who's here.
Yes.
So like I would be very, very careful with these concepts of like, this is a very common thing during bubbles. And you can talk to, you can listen to some of the greatest investors at all time. I forget if it's Ray Dalio or I don't think it was Ray Dalio because he's too like, he's more about, there's like the famous saying, it's like, well, if I buy a penny, I can only lose a penny. It's like, well, if you put $1 million into a penny stock, you're losing $1 million. You're losing the full percentage, right? So,
people are very irrational with not taking into account market cap and all these things.
Yeah, so I think that the reason Dan wasn't doing that here is because yes, there's this potential asymmetric return. It's like, okay, it can only go down 18,000, but the way the market is moving, I think it's more likely to go to, I think it's more likely to triple than it is to go to zero. Fine. He made that assessment. I don't know, he made that assessment based on vibes and what was happening before that. I mean, it's just true.
And again, this was done at a time that I had 7 figures of capital, netting multiple figures. So I jumped to a DGen example way down the line. This is not me advocating for what one should do or I would do if I was in between the $10,000 to $100,000 in liquidity.
And this is where like so for me, like I'm a long-term value investor. So I don't buy things expecting quick returns. I buy things that I think are and hold very long term. Like we're talking, like I have long-term theses on multiple generations in the Pokemon market, on certain items in the Pokemon market becoming more historically important, even more relevant to people over time. Certainly a PSA 10 first edition basic card holo would be in that category. And so I think buying that Venusaur as a long-term investment at 80% would have been a reasonable investment for Dan. But what Dan is saying is he didn't buy it for an investment. He bought it really for a short-term vibes play, feeling like the market was going up, and so it's going to keep going up. right? I mean, that's what you're basically saying. If I'm understanding, like your goal was to
And
sell it right away, not to put it aside for 10 years, 15 years.
no, I think I put it aside for 1 or 2 months. It was a short-term spec momentum type play
Okay.
combined with platform arbitrage.
Yeah.
And also it when I have a premier item like a PSA 10 base first hollow, I don't have those every week. To some extent, it aids my visibility. It gets more clicks on
Sure.
Instagram. It gets more people to my Fanatics auctions in general. So yeah, there were other portions of that play for sure.
So, I am picking at Dan right now, but like it's really not about Dan. Like, so I made this video. I made a video on my channel where I like went back on a video and I like that I talked about years ago, and we looked at like what my best investment from that video was, and the best investment advice I gave was a Wurmple. The Poke Card creator Wurmple has been the best performing card. It's gone up by like 90 times since I made that video or something, and
Mhm.
nobody's vibes was telling anybody that Wurmple was going to go up 90 times. So the reason that you have made money is not because you're good at vibes. I'm going to be very clear. It's because the entire Pokemon market has gone up a lot. If you have bought anything, if your vibes have told you Pokemon good, Pokemon go up, you've been correct. It doesn't matter basically what you've bought. Now, some things have gone up way
Mhm.
more than others, and the things that have gone up the most don't even necessarily make that much sense. And people don't really look at them because everyone's focused on the big shiny objects that in many cases haven't even gone up that much. We're talking 10x's on items. So you out there thinking you have great vibes and you know that well, I was right last time and this doubled or tripled and this box I held or this single, or this vintage card, whatever it is, like you're wrong. Like it's the whole market. And if your vibes had told you that the whole market was going to do what it was going to do again, you were either a genius, which like, don't go onto YouTube and tell anyone just invest all of your money because you shouldn't be giving away any of your genius,
Mhm.
because if you can predict like upward movements in markets and volatility like that, just get a huge loan from the bank, like borrow all the money you can from every person and just buy cards and you will become an insane multimillionaire. The rest is bullshit. So,
And th-
and Dan could come out here and be a jerk like most YouTubers and say, I'm a genius, I bought this Venusaur and it went up. You know what I mean? Like, and that's what most people do, right? They say, hey, I bought this thing and I'm really good at this and you should listen to my advice, and then it went up, right? Anyway, this is like my pet, this is
and
my pet peeve, and it's only become more of an issue because everyone here has made a lot of money, including you and I, and so people's egos have I'm sure, only gotten bigger since the last time I've been on YouTube, and people have only gotten more
and
irrational.
it's scary how many times like one of the most common phrases that I've been saying over the past 6 months and really 5 years, 5.5 years of me having my channel. I don't know. More people need to say I don't know more often. Way too many people say
Yeah,
guaranteed, always, never. They say these absolutes that they have no ability to say, and it's just scary because like people again, they like we all woke up rounding third, and the market like we're all scoring runs, we're all hitting grand slams, we're all anything you bought, nearly anything you bought, maybe not a handful of different things. Some of
yeah,
those which I'm buying actively today because I think they're undervalued relative to other things. But most anything you bought in the past few years is up significantly, and thinking you're a genius, thinking you're a savant, thinking you have it all figured out, thinking you're going to compound your money, doubling it every year into forever. It's just it can't. I mean, if you have $100, you can double dollars every day of your life. I mean, go work a job and you'll get $100, right? Go put it into gas in your car but once you start scaling, once you start operating, and I guess this ties in good to our conversation for the night, $10,000. Most any relatively savvy, relatively hustling person can double 10 grand in a month, couple months.
sure.
20 grand, 50 grand, you can double that in months or a year, 100 grand. I mean, there are people that will from 12 months as I speak these words, there are people that will double 100 grand into 200 grand. There are people that will double 250 grand into 500 grand. Very likely with the liquidity, with the opportunity in today's market, doubling $2 million, doubling $5 million, doubling 10, like doubling these big numbers starts becoming significantly more difficult.
Do you mind? Just so I understand, you're arguing like investing, you mean doubling, or like in their business doubling, or what do you mean?
I guess that's one thing that's extremely hard to suss out. Like I invest, I speculate, I gamble, I do business, I arbitrage, I do a little bit of everything. I haven't figured out the best way to convey this message, but last year I made a lot of money in Pokemon. Very, very big number. A lot of people get very defensive or they get very strange when someone says like I gross $10 million, gross five. Well, gross doesn't mean anything. Only net matters.
Yeah,
I'm gonna make a video.
I don't think Dan and I like saying that, and I'll speak for myself, but I think Dan's the exact same way. The reason I say it is because I want people to listen to me and not to
credibility check. Like Pokemon says,
and it's sort
of credibility check.
And because we're not good marketers, it's like if I don't say, "Hey, I've made $5 million in Pokemon," why should you listen to me? You shouldn't listen to me, right? And know, so it becomes a sort of thing of like we're sharing that. Now our arguments need to make sense because we could have just gotten extremely lucky, and in fact, we largely have, which is part of my point. But yeah.
When I say doubling X amount of money, I'm talking about not just investing. I'm talking about some hybrid combination, as I do, some hybrid combination as your 17-year-old graduating high school will likely do. I think it's prudent. I think it's wise to put 90+% of that capital into flipping. But underlying in that time that something might be in a grading company backlog, in that time that it might be in the mail, you are going to be getting some amount of luck, some amount of market movement. You're going to get some, like there are going to be some items that have been some items that you bought in the past 6 months, in the past year, where you bought a 10K collection. By the time it hit your door, you already made 20%. You bought a 10K collection for $8,000. By the time it got to your door, it was now worth $12,000. So you functionally paid 67% of the market price when it was delivered, right? That's not business acumen. That's not your prowess and expertise at the Pokemon market. That's some amount luck. That's some amount investment gains, return. Like however you want to define that. It's some mix of all of the above.
So let's get into it then using our framework, because I think that'll be interesting. Because as we start to transition, let's say, okay, we've talked about some things that we're going to get to our first 100,000. So once we're at our first 100,000, it's like, at what point are we starting to have the capital now? And let's just pick the number, because we can say that, okay, we've kind of talked about how we would get mostly to there. The different things we'd be looking at, like the wholesale opportunities we'd be looking at, the larger collection opportunities we'd be looking at to kind of push it, go as fast as we possibly can. And then we start to look at these other things and we could talk about them, consigning, streaming, some of these things that I think are, they're so different. It's like consigning is like a totally doesn't take up a lot of your time, but requires connections, requires trust, requires, building some sort of following, but then ideally is very fast and easy. Streaming, on the other hand, incredibly time intensive, obviously having a stream team like Dan and I have, very different than being the streamer yourself, but we'll talk about actually being the streamer versus, having streamers work for you or working with streamers, right? Very different things. We can get into that, but because we jumped into this sort of investing category, and I'm sure a lot of people are interested because people love the investing, collecting conversations. So for me, if I'm starting to get to 100,000 and I'm feeling like it's going really well, and I'm not feeling like I'm feeling like I'm able to start taking maybe 10% of that out. Let's say $10,000 out of it, because I really believe in the long term of Pokemon. And this is the difference between, I don't short-term speculate at all. So I do none of the 2 to 3 month plays. That doesn't mean that it's right. That I I believe that is an incredibly overhyped segment of people and the market, and I just am not a believer in it. So here's what I do, okay? I do arbitrage, business, flipping, or I do long-term investing. And what long-term investing doesn't mean I'm not going to sell in 3 months, because I buy things to long-term invest, and then if they explode in value, I sell them.
They
So,
meet your price threshold for a decade from now
exactly, right.
in
So this,
3
so this
months.
is the
Yes.
thing, right? Just because you buy something with the intention of a long-term investment doesn't mean you're going to actually end up holding it for a really long time. And I'll explain that. But what a long-term investment to me looks like is, I think that in 20 to 30 years, the Pokemon market is going to be the high end of the market. There is going to be, I am operating under this thesis, there's going to be $500 million collections of non-sports cards. And if there are $500 million collections, like there are of fine art, of, getting there with some sports card memorabilia, card collections, if we're getting into that range, that market cap, what items are going to be in that collection, and what price do they need to be in order for those types of collections to exist? And if there's 20, because right now, if you have like a $10 million collection, you have a top 20 collection in the world. That's nothing. That is absolutely nothing, in my opinion, compared to the potential of Pokemon and how big the Pokemon hobby is relative to comic books, sports cards, and other, where, yeah. And it's gotten it now, the gap is closed. Like, this thesis was much, on the one hand, I had this thesis much stronger 8 years ago. On the other hand, it was more risky. It was less likely to happen 8 years ago. So I'll explain. So right now, it's far more likely to happen because of the amount of interest and engagement, the fact that prices have already gotten to where they've gotten, the fact that multiple generations are so into it, the fact that we have all these institutional investors. It is more likely to happen now than it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. My level of confidence is slightly higher than it was. However, unfortunately, so are the prices. So what you do with that is, I would say it's about the same. In my personal estimation, if you're buying, there are a lot of cards you could buy today that you could have bought 2-3 years ago. And although you should have bought them 2-3 years ago, like if you had 20/20 hindsight, I don't think it's any really different than buying it now. Because I think and again, this could be wrong, this is my assessment, right?
The risk adjusted opportunity, basically.
Exactly, for making somewhat less of the gains, right? So
Yep.
because again, your AJ Scaramucci's, these guys coming in buying $16 million Pikachu illustrators just the beginning. And Pokemon is such a worldwide phenomenon, and there's so many big spenders in China, in Japan, in Europe. The market is so deep. If you look at how much Golden is selling, and you just look at the depth of the market cap, you look at the hunger, the appetite. Now, that doesn't mean I have any clue, or I'm going to try and predict what's going to happen 3, 6, a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Okay. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to invest in the best of the best item that I think is relatively undervalued to other items, and that I think is going to be the most historically important, the most relevant item to those collectors, to those. What items are the $50 million, are the $10 million, are the $30 million collectors, are they going to want in their collection in 10, 15, 20 years? That's how I try to think about this. And again, there's a speculation, there's a guessing involved in that, right? And that's sort of the risk, right? So you have to be humble about that, like, right? But you want to place your best guesses on what those items are going to be, and SM Pratt's older rare Minter better is a decent place to start, but Minter doesn't really mean much. It actually means nothing, because I'd much rather a super rare, historic, important card that's bent in half, in many cases, depending on the price. So let's take out Minter. That doesn't really, I think, add anything to the idea. But what you want is something that and let's take older, because older and vintage is not valuable, and replace it with historic and relevant and important. Because there could be items that come out in 10 years from now that might be more important than items that have come out in the last 15 years. that we don't even know. The first time Pokemon does a numbered serialized card, if they ever do one. The first time Pokemon does like some sort of special, one of one release, some sort of, real like cool. They do something. They do a Van Gogh Pikachu type of thing, but it's actually rare. There's only 100 of them or 50 of them or 10 of them. And that becomes one of the most like important and desirable cards in the hobby. So it's not just that it's old. It's just that a lot of the older cards are more likely to be historically relevant and important because they're the first appearances. They're the things that people are going to be the most nostalgic with. And many of them are also the rarest, right? So understanding that, right? So you're looking at the, it's like I'm back on YouTube and whenever I was on YouTube in intrinsic value, you're looking at and again, we're not, Dan and I can debate. It's not intrinsic value from the standpoint of, of like it produces something, but intrinsic value from, let's replace the word intrinsic and let's put in the word objective qualities that are unchangeable about the item, right? There are this many produced. It came out in this date. It was the first appearance of this popular card, right? These objective underlying truths about the item that don't change depending on narrative. And what you're looking for is you're looking to find items that you think that the narrative is underhyped. So, for example, something I've talked about are like the World's promos in this environment. Some of the high-end, trophy cards. Like those types of things I would make a case fit all of those things. They fit having, popular Pokemon, Pikachu. They fit extreme rarity. They fit historic event. They fit no negative narratives around them. Nobody knows them. They fit a bunch of them just came out of some private collections and, it suppressed all of the pricing, right? So I'm not telling people to go out and buy those, but, please don't. But I'm giving it as an example of something that hits a lot of those buttons. Now, if you're going to have something that hits every button, you're probably going to have to pay up for it because people probably know it. People are it's already priced in. And really what you're betting on is not that the card is relatively undervalued to the rest of the market. You're betting on the overall Pokemon market. Buying a PSA 10 first edition Charizard today is a perfect example of that. That, in my opinion, is clearly, you never know for sure. I do not believe that card is undervalued relative to the rest of the hobby. I do, however, believe that if there are $50 million collections one day, that card will be worth multiple millions. I think there's a very safe chance that will be one of the cards. Now, that may not, it will very likely not have the biggest return. It's not going to probably have a 90x return because too many people know about it, right? But it's very likely to have a solid, stable, big return. If the Pokemon hobby goes up that much, right? And so my thesis or my theory is that there's a decent enough chance. And to go back to Dan's point, sorry, I'm talking so much, and then I'll turn it over to you, Dan. Apologies.
You're fine.
His Venusaur idea. I would have bought that Venusaur card with the plan to hold. So everything Dan did is exactly what I do, except I buy it to hold. If I try to buy 80% of market to give myself a little extra, right? I try to pick a card that I think is maybe relatively undervalued at the time. I try to pick a card that's historically extremely important. And then I have a plan to hold it for 20 to 30 years. Now, if the card triples in a few months or doubles in a few months, I may end up actually selling it because I think for whatever reason, the volatility makes me uncomfortable. I think the new price point, I'd rather take that money and then put it in another card that hasn't doubled that I think is equally good. So I do that a lot. But when I'm initially buying the card, my plan is if it doesn't go up in price, I plan to hold it for 30 years. And if it doesn't go way up in price, I plan to hold it for 30 years. And the other reason why those cards do end up going up like that is because that is the reason people are buying them. The psychology of people who are buying them are people who can afford them, people who can afford to actually hold them and collect them, people who value them way above what the market values them. There are cards I'm buying for $5,000 that I think easily should be $100,000 in this market. Honestly, like no doubt in my mind, and I I don't go onto Instagram like some of these other people and try and push my cards up in value, you know. Instead, what I do, I secretly try and buy every single copy. Like because I actually believe in it, I don't need to go out there and hype up the market. I just make my plays from the shadows and I buy up just like I did back in the day with E-Series and Gold Stars, and I buy up a lot of it. Now, the fact that I've been able to sell them in 3 to 4 years and make an absolute killing, luck. But my thesis was that in 20 to 30 years, I'd be able to sell them and probably make some of the returns I made in 3 to 4 years, which is insane. And so when I'm investing, when I'm taking that 10%, so let's say if I have that $100,000, I have $10,000 now. What am I buying? There's probably a few cards I would buy. There are some cards that you can buy for $10,000 right now that I'm not going to say what cards, but I'm going to say, do you feel like they're relatively rare, right? And relatively like they're absolute rarity, not just condition rarity, but absolute rarity as well. Compared to something else. It's like, well, this card over here is going for 50,000, or this card over here is going for 5,000. This card is rarer, cooler, better art, better story. Why is it only going for 500? Right? Those types of cards is what I'd be looking for. Is what I'd be buying with the attitude of not. I'm going to flip and a bit as my business. And this is also why I keep my business completely separate from my collection. My collection is long-term holds and speculation. And with all of the people I work with, we don't have business and we don't invest as a business. I tell everyone we're not going to invest and sit on product. You can do that with your own money. We're going to pay out from the business, and then you take that money, that excess money, and invest it outside. That's how I keep it totally clean, Dan. So there is no overlap between those things for me. And the only reason I ever sell something is because the market goes up so quickly that it shocks me, not because I was planning on selling it in 3 months. So the biggest difference, probably between Dan and I is like, I never would have made the Van Gogh play that Dan made. Right? Worked out extremely well. He made a lot of money. At the same time, I was buying PSA 10 Gold Stars. I made a ton of money on those. We both made a lot of money. Anything worked. As long as you bought Pokemon, engaged in Pokemon, did anything, don't think you're smart. Dan and I were lucky, hardworking, engaged. I think that now long term, are those Van Goghs going to be a good investment? Maybe better than I realized. I mean, maybe, you know what I mean? Like, right? Like at the time, did Dan think they were investments? Probably not, or he would have held a bunch, right? Like, but again, Dan, I don't want to speak for you, but I think that my perception is that you probably go 10% off vibes. You let yourself almost, correct me if this is wrong, but there's like some amount that you just kind of let yourself vibes.
Depending on the day. And this is a thing where it's all become such a big swirling thing. And going back 12 years, I don't know about you. I guess I do know a little bit about it. I didn't set out with some grand aspirations of running an 8-figure business someday. I didn't set out with aspirations of building a $10 million collection. I liked shiny cardboard. I was nostalgic for it. It was part of my youth. I loved eBay. I loved collecting. I loved coins. I loved video games. I loved beer steins, all the different things that I collected. And I knew that instead of spending $5,000, it's like, I'm going to seed with $5,000 and I'm going to buy, sell, accumulate this big, cool, shiny collection that I enjoy a lot for free. That was always my goal. So this turned into significantly more, largely by sheer luck. It turned into significantly more than I ever expected. Now, was there some amount of a keen eye? Was there some amount, like my collector senses, all that stuff had me buying things that performed quite well because they were appealing to me. They were appealing broadly in hindsight to a lot of people, naturally.
But did they really perform that well?
I mean,
at that time, like, you could have bought Pokecard Collectors or Gold Stars or first edition WotC, and you would have potentially done better if you had bought Gengar. Like, it depends on what you had bought. Then even the Van Gogh Pikachu and the Van Gogh Pikachu.
I'm not talking about the Van Goghs now. I'm talking 2014 when I was buying WotC. When I was buying everything back then.
But to me, like, again, I'm sorry to be difficult, but like to me, like my mindset on that stuff is like we're just doing the obvious thing, which is buying the most historic, best items in the hobby because we're not overcomplicating it. Clearly, the first appearance, like it's not a hot take to buy low pop Skyridge cards. Like you're not big brand, and people, the big brand people are like, no, actually buy it's this new thing and this is the greatest set of all time. Like they're the ones who are trying to big brain things and they're deluding themselves, if I'm being very blunt and a bit harsh. But I don't think we're particularly wise or have good taste. Like it's very easy to know what to buy when it's those things. I think the hard things are not even taste, Dan. I think they're knowledge. Like it's the trophy stuff. It's the niche because it's not a taste thing that you and I are speculating on those. It's a understanding the rarity, understanding the history, understanding the story, and believing that other people just don't know they exist. And if everyone knew they existed, they'd be way higher. Where most people know about Skyridge, most people know certainly about base set, and so I don't. That's my thesis, right? So like, I try to go for those other things before I go for the main things if I think those other things are really undervalued because again with the thesis of like but it's not because I have better taste or because I think my taste I'm truthfully guys like my thing is just like I looked at what was really expensive after 100 years of sports cards. I looked at what was really expensive after 60 years of comic books and I said let's not overcomplicate this. It makes perfect sense why these items are the most expensive items. Story, narrative, big popular character or player, extremely relatively rare to other things in the hobby, extremely nostalgic, characters that people really care about, that people really love, right? It's like the overcomplication of like, whereas like there is nothing to compare team up to. People are totally, it's an unprecedented, there is no successful team up story from any hobby that I know. Unless you think team up is like the Ken Griffey Jr. like rookie card or something. Like, but again, that card, like there's tons of them and only in super good condition. And there's a lot in Pokemon that has totally defied, like it's the first, like there is no Van Gogh Pikachu from any other hobby. So people who have made money on those things, like phenomenal, like great. And by the way, that going up a huge amount only makes me more confident about the stuff that's like really solid, that has really good fundamentals. It's funny because the last few years it's made certain people way less confident. They're like, well, vintage is bad to invest in, or historical things are bad to invest in. Everyone's moved to popularity. It's like phenomenal for me because I'm just going to continue to slowly buy as much of the historically important rare stuff because I know that it doesn't matter what people say. The short-term narratives don't matter. They matter on the price in the short run, but in the long run, it's just going to follow the same pattern as everything else because that pattern makes sense. It's a sensible pattern. Now, that doesn't mean, again, I think that there are going to be cards probably from every era that outperform the vintage cards in the long run, right? There could be items and cards, and honestly, that'll be a really good sign that Pokemon's doing amazing and that new cards are becoming super important to people and super nostalgic and relevant. And frankly, it only makes me more sure of the old stuff. Mm-hmm. And one lesson my dad taught me is like, you're never going to get the best investment because the best investment is also likely going to be one of the riskiest investments. So it actually wasn't the best investment. You know what pays the best on a roulette wheel? Guessing a single number. It doesn't mean that you should.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's this thing of like where people look at the thing that did the best and they say, oh, I'm going to pick that next thing. And it's like often a huge mistake. That thing should just make you more confident in your overall thesis on the broader Pokemon market. And then you should pick reasonably safe things, strategic things, and hold and have a plan to hold for a long time, all that type of stuff. Anyway, I've been talking for so long. And
I think we're going a little bit of a different direction, which I'm fine with too. But like, I try to think of the biggest singular returns that I've had. But like, never will my S&P 500 in the span of 5 or 10 years 100x 200x, 300x. There are items on my desk as we speak that in the past 10 years or less are 200 times what I paid for them. And honestly, like that was never my underlying thesis. So it falls under semantics, but I used to have this battle more 3 years ago, 4 years ago. I've just used the I word. In the past 12 years, including today, I don't consider anything I do in the Pokemon space investing. It is the accepted vernacular of the space. So like I use the word because that's what everyone has understood and agreed on. But going back to 2014, my first buys in the space, assembling all the PSA 9 WotC stuff that I did, and the Gold Stars and the Level X's and the
But
Legends.
I'm actually investing. Like there are people who are actually investing who believe in 15, 20,
and I've not
years.
though.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've not ever done that. Maybe someday I will. But thus far, like I per my own definitions, I've not done that. Yet I've seen, largely through luck, I've seen some obscene gains. There are definitely some things.
Dan, you're a really good businessman and you've built an amazing business. So to give you some credit here publicly, and I've obviously said this to you privately, like you're a really strong business operator. So it also like I am a pretty good investor. So like there is also like skill sets, talents, and like I was brought up around my dad, right? Who's like literally this is his whole fucking job. Like you have made a lot of money operating a business in the space, which makes it the better you are as a business person, the more it makes sense for you to keep all your money churning short term in the business. And the idea of putting something away, I know I want to talk about the pallets because I think the pallets are the most interesting kind of like they're the closest thing to investing. The pallets and the trophy cards I think are like the closest thing you probably get to investing. I think we should talk about it because like because I think that the pallets, for example, they fit in your business, which is part of it. They but as a backup plan, it's like if I have to start opening it and selling it, I can through my businesses, and my businesses will need inventory, and I have built-in margin there, and that helps support me, right? On top of that, I believe in them somewhat as an investment, as a short-term or a medium-term investment, a 2, 3, 4, 5 year investment, and we can talk about why you believe in that. I'm interested in that. I think a lot of people in this space continue to believe in that, and certainly it's worked the last 4 or 5 years. Of course, if you'd taken all that money and put it into Gold Stars, you would have made more. Just to be clear, everyone would have made more, not just you. I'm just saying, like, just so people know, because like most people don't own Gold Stars, so they have no clue, right? They just know what they bought. They just 3x their money on a box, or even 10x their money on a box, and they think that they're the biggest winner. When in reality, there were many, many items that you could have bought that would have done that. And that's not a slam at you. Understand why I'm bringing that up. I just want, because people know. They just are like, I made a lot of money, YouTube, man. Why are you so negative? I know what I'm doing.
One thing that's happening more and more, and I've talked about it in my palette videos, I think gains are just a lot of future optimism is being priced in on day one. I was able to assemble those pallets, the original pallets, with $500 booster cases. Today, the equivalent, the buy-in cost is 3x. So, like, if you're lucky, you're buying these things at release for $250 a box and more, $1,500 a case. A lot of future optimism is being priced in. I think what's going to happen, and I've got an example of a card. This card has 250x'd in the past 10 years. This card was $40, if not less, in PSA 10, widely available on eBay. You could have bought dozens of copies back in 2016, 2017. I was given this as a Secret Santa gift back 9-10 years ago. I forget if it was 2016, 2017. The card was $30 to $40. It's now $9,000 to $10,000. Like, the equivalent of this today that I think is significantly worse, I think, and again, intrinsic value, semantic, blah, 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 but like the fundamentals of this card, Pikachu with clothes on, very, very plus EV, very, very good thing. The equivalent of this card that I would say is worse generally, one, probably because there's more being made, the Fukuoka, the Hiroshima, and the whatever the third one was there. These boxes were widely available for um $40. I want to
Yeah.
say for the
Something.
Pikachu, something like that. They're up there, the opened ones, but you could buy these boxes for 30, 40, $50 somewhere in there. You could have bought dozens, hundreds of them, a lot of them. Um, the boxes I bought sets through Retro, through whoever else. I'm buying the Hiroshima, the Fukuoka, and I can't think of that third one. I'm buying those for 150, $200 a piece. My buy-in price is 5x, and I think a lot of that optimism is being pulled forward. And here's another card. This card is more than 200x, maybe 250, 300. My memory is not perfect. I used to buy Eevee, Psyduck, Rowlet, the three of the cheaper ones. You had Pikachu and Mimikyu, which were significantly more expensive. I used to buy the trio for $15 to $20, maybe a little bit more conversion fees, buy fees, forwarding them along. I don't remember exactly. This card in PSA 8 now is $1,500 or something. So it's gone from $5, $6, $7, $8 somewhere in that vicinity up to $1,500. Again, depending on which numbers you take there, that's between 2 and 300x. The equivalent of a card like this, at least by the metrics that I see and what I think, the gray felt hat, cards along those lines, a lot of that future price potential gains is being like pulled forward to today. And my prediction, I don't know when it will happen, but my underlying thesis back when I started the palettes was that this is the same. It's funny because it's the same thesis that people have today. Sealed goes up, hobby will grow, long on cardboard. My kids enjoyed it. Every year my wife teaches, more students in all of her classes every year over year have grown. Multi-generational, unlike sports cards, multi-generational, unlike coins and comics, Steins, especially. And the whole Pikachu won't go to jail, Pikachu won't retire, blow out his Achilles, whatever like that. So I agree with all that stuff. I don't know when, but at some point, when it becomes a sure thing, when it becomes a guarantee, the only natural thing to do is like if Destined Rivals is guaranteed, which it's not, mind you, like keep that in mind as I say this. If Destined Rivals is guaranteed to evolve in skies, if it's guaranteed to upon 4 years old be a $2,500 booster box, the logical price to pay day one, year two, that should be $1,000, $1,500 booster box. If it's guaranteed, that is the downside scenario. Ascended Heroes, look at 151. 151 is a $600 booster box, or ETB. If, and people say this, I know you're not on YouTube much today. People are saying this, Jake. People are saying the worst case scenario for Ascended Heroes is it will be $600, $500 in 3 years because it's better than 151. That's the logic that they're using, or lack of logic that they're using. If that's not true, one. If that was true, though, Ascended Heroes should be $300 today. It should be $400 today. Hell, if I had a way to guarantee those ETBs would be $600 in 2.5 years, I would pay $400 today for an investment that attractive. I would pay more than that for an investment that attractive. So that's where it gets scary. Is like we look at this history and we think like guaranteed because of XYZ. We're already baking a lot of that optimism in. The thing that I don't know today, we might still be early enough that those things come true. Ascended Heroes might be $500 ETB in 2 years. Prismatic might be a $500 ETB in two and a half years. The Hiroshima,
you would be foolish to. First of all, can I just a sound check for you guys? Is everything okay? I was fooling around with my phone. I just want to make sure that it didn't double you and make it hard for people to hear you. Because
I heard an echo for a second, but like we're good now. It was a minor echo for a second, but we're good now.
Okay, let me know, guys, if you can hear me and Dan. I'm worried that I'm doubling on Dan. I don't want it to be an echo, so you guys like can't hear him. Well.
Oh, Tohoku was the other one that I couldn't think of.
What was I going to say? Yeah, I mean, it is certainly a lot more likely that these boxes will go to 600-700 than the first boxes that went to 600-700, in my opinion, because now there's this price history and price memory, because there's this narrative that they always go to that, and that narrative has a bunch of power. People believe it, and because a lot of people believe it, a lot of people buy it, and it has a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? A short-term self-fulfilling prophecy. The problem is it's a greater fool. Like when narratives drive those things, it becomes a math problem. How many times can new sets come out and do that before there aren't new people to continue to spend the money to push it up? As long as there are new people and more people coming in who believe that and agree, and you can keep getting more people, absolutely. The reason why the top 1% explodes in value over time in hobbies, and when the 80 to 90% of items can flatline and stay the same, is because the ultra wealthy, like, not only do it's a kind of sad rule of like exponential, like how wealth income inequality splits over time, but the ultra wealthy, they want the best of the best to show off, to chase, to enjoy, and they have so much money that there's so few of these items that they fight over them, and they push that, and we haven't seen that in Pokemon yet. That, like, the people who bid up the Pikachu Illustrator, like there's some of that in that, but mostly it's those people are still speculating that down the line there are going to be actual people doing that. We don't have actual 200, 500 millionaires buying Pokemon cards yet. Like, it's going to take another 30 years. It's going to take those people in our generation who eventually have that much money to be those people, right? Are they going to care about Ascended Heroes? No. So Ascended Heroes going from $300 to $600 has nothing to do with that. Ascended Heroes going from $300 to $600 requires two things. Ascended Heroes continuing to remain relevant, Pokemon continuing to boom and people to really care, other sets not coming out that take away too much attention from it, there not being a huge reprint that massively, shifts the amount. And could all those things happen? Absolutely. In fact, you could say there's a better than 50% chance. I have no idea, right? It's why I don't speculate. I don't guess. I prefer my long-term thesis. And I'm not looking for 2x returns in 5 years. I'm looking for 50x returns in 20, 30 years with passive money, right? So it's... And if I was looking for 2x, 3x returns, I'd rather just flip as a business. I'd rather just put that money to work as a business. There just isn't a place for me to be sitting on 1,000 booster boxes, even though obviously I could easily, but it would be the risk reward there. I'd much rather put that money into long-term investments that are passive and I think will ultimately have much bigger returns. I'd rather, or put it actively into my business that's going to make me a far more likely guaranteed money. And I can flip and move much quicker. Now the issue, and I want to touch on two things that's being said in the chat. One is this whole question of like, should I sell my slabs? Because this is the question I get all the time. Because they're like, Jake, I did that. I bought these slabs. I own these slabs, but now I can't afford them. It gets to this point of like, what do you do when they 4X? You have a long-term hold plan, but then they 4X, and we can touch on that. Just I think it's important, and I think both of us will have stuff to say there. But this other part of like, I don't have the money for any of these super high-end cards. Here's my answer. Don't invest in Pokemon in a serious way. You're not an investor. Don't seriously invest in Pokemon. Build a business so that you can afford more investable quality items, or speculate on steel product for fun. Most people out there who are watching and enjoying the YouTube videos, like 95% of them are speculating for fun. And there's no problem. And us hating on the content creator that they love, or being critical, they're like, it's annoying to them for good reason, because they're not doing anything wrong and they're just trying to enjoy themselves, and they just want a content creator telling them, good job, it's going to go up, whatever, right? It makes perfect sense, right? And that's 95%. Now I'm sure there is some percentage out there who have pallets, which goes to, what you're doing. Again, percentage of your net worth, and like you still have less than most of these people because you have such a much higher net worth.
It's getting up there, though. I mean,
and that's why I want to talk about that, because I think that's interesting. But I think where do you draw that? Like, when is buying pallets or buying singles, modern singles, whatever you're doing with, and let's say with items that we don't know. One, obviously, let's just put the reprint debate and argument aside. Whatever. Let's say none of these things are being reprinted, but we don't know. Just like Evolutions, has been such a massive underperformer, but it was the biggest set ever at the time. Just like Burning Shadows was such a massive underperformer, but it was the biggest set at the time. Just like Vivid Voltage was the biggest set at the time, and it's been a massive underperformer. Is Ascended Heroes going to be Vivid Voltage? Or is it going to be, Hidden Fates, which is like now catching up a little bit, but it's like kind of disappointing and certainly is not a historic set? Or is it going to be Evolving Skies or 151? Now, is 151 going to end up being, which one is that, right? So, like, none of these sets have existed that long, right? So this is part of the problem. But it's like, I'm just putting this because people, like, and more to the point, are there other hobbies that have 20-year, 30-year time horizons for items like these where it actually demonstrates that they hold value for 20, 30 years? Because that's what scares me way more, because I'm an actual long-term investor. If you are flipping in 3 to 5 years, it's much different. Like your strategy is much just more on like market conditions are going to continue. People are going to feel the same way. There's going to be the same amount of demand. The same amount is going to rip. Pokemon isn't printing way more, and it's just going to continue to do what it's going to do. And obviously that could happen. Like there's probably quite a good chance that's going to happen. The chance is not high enough and the reward is not high enough for me. Let's put it that way. The odds of it happening are too unpredictable, and the potential reward isn't enough, and the difficulty to actually move and sell and deal with all those items and store all of those items. And the fact that if that happens, I think my items are going to do even better again, potentially.
Yeah.
But it just becomes this sort of thing of like, it just doesn't have a place in my portfolio. So, but for you, okay, what's the thinking on the pallets? Where are you at on them? What's your plan? Are you continuing to add to them? I'm curious, and we can just get into investing. And I guess to tie back to the point of this video, like where we're at, we're now we built that early stage of our business. I know we still need to talk about streaming and some of these other things, and when to do all those things. But let's say you've made money doing all those things. You now have money to actually invest, to put aside. You're in more of a position than Dan and I are now. Where are you putting your money, Dan? Why are you putting it in that, etc.?
Yeah. So one thing I feel the need. It's been a 2+ hour live stream, and I haven't flashed the buckets yet. Let me flash the buckets really quickly. It's not a Dan live stream without flashing the buckets. In January every year, the first thing I do is max out my 401ks and IRAs. And I know not everyone does that, but that's my foundational, all this could go to zero. The S&P 500 will never go to zero, at least not in a world that will be 10 years from now, the S&P 500 being zero, the world would fundamentally be different. As much as it pains me to say this and some of you to hear this, the world could exist as we know it largely without Pokemon. That is just a statement of fact. Continuing on beyond that, though, I'm at a point where I
will add, Dan, less so and less so. Every year the market cap increases. This amount of collectibles disappearing and the value disappearing, it's a similar thing with crypto. It has a staying power in itself. When you actually look at the market cap on collectibles, it's approaching hundreds of billions of dollars across all collectible categories. It's getting insane. So I agree, and I definitely agree with the non-producing companies that make you food and water disappearing. The impact, not only the financial impact of the money, the imaginary money disappearing, but the actual impact on your life. You and I are very much in agreement on that. It's
for Coca-Cola, Lowe's, McCormick, Clorox, and all those companies that produce tangible things, and they have people and property and assets. If you can buy Coca-Cola for $0, the world has fundamentally changed in some way. Anyways, though, continuing on, the only reason I invest, I want to say speculate, but I use the vernacular accepted here. The only reason I invest in the pallets is because I fundamentally one reason that I like it, and this applies to slabs too, not as extensively, I don't think. But in stocks, I have to buy at 100.1% of market, and I have to sell at 99.9% of market. There's a bid ask spread. I have no ins. Maybe this is different for you if you work at a company, employee stock options, you might be able to buy at 85-90% of market. That's the exception, not the rule. But one underlying reason that I like this stuff is that day one, day zero that I buy them, I put 50 grand on the pallet. I can sell it that day for $55,000 in net 10% margin. So I like my baked in, and it's ironic because to a lot of people out there, it is the opposite way for them, to a worse case than stocks. So for people that have built something big, that have the ability to buy at 80 to 90% and sell at 100 to 110%, it actually works in your favor to the tune of 5, 10, 20%. If you're new in this and you're buying on eBay, you're buying on Fanatics or whatever from a guy like me, you might be paying 110% of market. You're the person paying me 110% of market, and then you're the one selling to me at 80%. So it's a dangerous thing because it's like Jake has built to the extent to where the odds, the high fees, the high frictional fees are like tilted in our favor. Whereas for most people, like they're on the wrong end of that. So I've built over the past 12 years the underlying advantage of having 5, 10, 20% benefit up front. And yeah, I just and like this is all time stamped to May of 2024 was the first video that I made. Hour-long video talking about the pals, talking about my underlying thesis, talking about my like I believe that there will be slabs that will outperform likely significantly my pallets. And the pallets aren't like my only speculation, my only investment. I do from time to time I have a lot of things off the pallets. But anyways, my underlying thesis is that like I am long on cardboard. I am long on Pokemon. I am long on the hobby. Very solidified 6 months ago, back in December, when Pokemon is doing a multi-$100 million capital investment into buying all that additional print space, facility, capacity. That is something that makes me significantly more bullish. Short term, not on $700 Destin Rivals booster boxes, $200 Send It Heroes ETBs of a few month old, 1 year old product. But like something like that makes me think that, hey, when I got back into the hobby, they were printing 2 or 3 billion cards a year, making XY, making Sun and Moon, making those sets. And then we had this big growth. So when I started with the pals, $500, it felt like a reasonable buy-in. It felt like at some point I thought the hobby would continue to grow. Did I think it was going to step up as quickly as it did? Obviously not in hindsight. Otherwise, I would have made 10 pallets instead of one. But so yeah, underlying thesis is that I know that I'm not a good.
We've lost more potential money than we've ever made 100
Oh
times.
yeah,
over.
yeah.
If we knew what was going to
all
happen,
could be billionaires with Bitcoin. Like functionally, most people could have been a billionaire at some point in their life.
I did this mathematical thing of like, if I could give away all my assets and get $1,000 in 2016, could I have made? Would I make more money if I knew what was going to happen? And I would only could make one buy. And it's like, yeah, you could have just literally just bought Bitcoin.
Like I could, like, these two cards were cards that, well, I never bought these, which is sickening to think back. And I was in my Kanto Dan English only set collector Dan days.
Ooh.
But this one, I bought a lot of these. I bought thousands and thousands of dollars. I could like, and I sold them so early. And so yeah, but anyways, continuing on, my underlying thesis is that like I don't think I'm good at understanding the average consumer. I'm gonna do more like the index fund type thing. I'm gonna buy a little bit of all the English sets. I have the built-in advantages. I'm getting them wholesale. I'm getting them for some percentage of market, and I'm gonna set them back. And I don't think, and this is the crazy part. One of the crazy parts. I didn't think that I would replicate the returns of Phantom Forces. I didn't think that I would replicate the returns of Team Up and all these other things, which at the time that I started the pallets weren't as insane as they are today. I don't even know what Phantom Forces was. I guess I could pull up a spreadsheet and find it. But so I fully intended and expected my investment returns to pale in comparison to what they would have had I started this palette endeavor in 2014 with Phantom Forces and Flashfire and Roaring Skies and Primal Clash for $400, $450 booster cases. But yeah, so I think it's a higher likelihood that I make some floor percentage. What that percentage is exactly, I don't know. I think in Palette Video 1, back in May of 2024, I said I'd be happy if Palette 1 went from 50K to a little bit over 100K by 2030. Well, now it's $250,000. So it's like it's or $200,000. I think it's Palette 1. So it's 4x in 2 years. I said I would have been happy if it slightly over 2x in 5 or 6 years. And so I thought that there was, and this is me being very, very, Jake knows, everyone who follows me closely knows how negative I am. Maybe it's my scientist engineer brain.
Well, that was going to be my question. Because Dan, what it really comes down to is like, not do you put money into Pokemon? You've made that decision, but why those instead of? Because I think those are good. By the way, palettes are not bad, and particularly the way he's getting it. And I want people to hear that. Like, I don't think it's, if you're getting it below MSRP and you have storage and you have ways of offloading them and and you believe in Pokemon, like, it's not bad. It's just why those and not vintage, like trophies and vintage slabs and things that, why do you view those as better investments? And do you view them better long-term investments or more short-term investments, or like, how do you actually see it? Just truthfully.
One thing, like I viscerally, I could not more fundamentally disagree with the value that we collectively as a market put on the third party opinion of these graders. And I know, I know that this is almost like a blind spot to me. So I force myself. I actually have. I showed him in a Patreon recently. I don't think I showed him on YouTube. I have some trophy Pikachus that I bought recently. So like the pellets are not the only thing. I bought some Burn Towers. I bought some, I'm not going to spill everything that I bought, but I bought some things in the past year that I bought for lower in this market than I sold them 4 or 5 years ago, which feels obscene to me. It feels insane. And honestly, there are 5 singular slabs that I can think of off the top of my head that
it actually makes a lot of sense when you think about it. It makes a lot of sense because it's where the demand and the marketing is not around any of those cards and hasn't been around any of those cards. So to me, it only further pushes my thesis seems even more correct. Like, I'm more confident that those items haven't moved because it just shows the power. Now, the danger is, does that mean the whole market, including those, we should stay away from because it's so, right? Like, that would be the concern.
We're buying those because they feel undervalued because they're down while everything else is up. The answer might be that everything else needs to go down so significantly and those are just going to stay flat or go up 5 or 10% or something, right?
Yeah, or that the consumer is so uneducated and it's so business driven and money driven that because in a hobby where people really care about the items, they're going to do the research to actually find those items. So the fact that not a lot of people have done that or gotten to those things, or they don't have the convictions to actually buy them, shows that there aren't that many collectors, because collectors actually prefer those items on average, like high-end collectors. High-end collectors are not going to prefer having palettes to collect in the long run. I don't buy it. I think they prefer having items that there are 12 copies in the world and to get the highest possible grade of it, just because that's literally what human beings have done in every other hobby, or high-end human beings. So it becomes this thing of like, because of that, that one element concerns me. But then I think, well, but look at all the marketers and the YouTubers and they're all just, none of them ever talk about it. So it's not really that people aren't really interested. It's just that there's not a lot of education going on, or like broad education. There's not a lot of education happening that's interesting and entertaining and high quality. And we talk endlessly for hours. So no one's ever going to get through that. And even when we do get to the cards, we don't really talk about it in a way that a new person could understand. We hint, oh, I'm buying this trophy. What are they talking about? So it becomes this thing of like anyway. But I agree.
And
I agree with everything you're saying. Makes sense to me. And you don't agree, and you don't like the grading. So buying low pop PSA 10s it instinctively doesn't work for you. And so
mm.
instead you go for absolute rarity, which is why you've gone for some of these trophy cards to kind of add to your palettes, which makes sense.
And back in the day, what I always used to do is like I had at one point I had every WotC first edition where applicable. I didn't go unlimited for like your base. Sorry, I only base was the only one. Base I had all 4 major variants. I had first edition Shadowless Unlimited, and then fourth print 99 2000, whatever you want to call it. But for all sets applicable, I had the first edition. Obviously, E series there weren't first edition, so I didn't have those. I had 370 slabs at one point. And you know, like the way that I appreciate a slab is like at arm's length. If it looks relatively centered, if it looks relatively clean on the front side, that's all I care about. The different, like honestly, most 7s meet my metrics, my thresholds. And years ago, my ideal collecting grade for me was like 9s. It's like I'll sell my 10s because they're so minimally better than my 9s, if they're even better. Like I've held thousands of 9s in my hands that have been better than many of the 10s that I've owned, right? And like the amount of overlap between 8, 9, 10 is just massive. I would disproportionately try to keep the cleaner 9s. And then one like bit of dissatisfaction that I always found, and it's ironic to say dissatisfaction because it was like kind of a very lucrative thing. If I owned a 9 in my collection, I would want the cleanest ones, but then I'd be confronted with this. This is a super clean 9. I remember years ago, I took my PSA 9 base for Blastoise. It's like, this is too clean. I'm going to try to BGS 10 it. And I BGS 9-5'd it, and I sold it for a 50% premium to what the PSA 9 was at the time. I made thousands of dollars at the time. So I couldn't even have, and I guess with a PSA 10, that wouldn't be as much of a consideration because like that's kind of maxed out. But I always had this underlying like discomfort. I can optimize these further. When I would get the 10s, it's like, if I look at this closely, this is no better than my 9s. It's worth 10 times as much. I'm just going to sell it and get multiple of the 9s. Well, now I have a copy that's cleaner than the 10. I just so fundamentally disagree with.
I'm going to preface what I'm going to say once again with like, because we're talking not just you and I'm not saying this for you. I'm saying it more for your audience.
Yeah.
But Dan is like, he's the guy. He's like my go-to guy. He's, I think, the go-to guy for business content on Pokemon. And so when people come to me and ask me like for recommendations, I'm trying to start a business, I'm trying to do this, I always push them to Dan. I do think that Dan I've seen this blind spot in Dan as an investor because he's not a collector. There's an element of Dan, I'm just going to have you respond. There's an element of it that like, you're just so confused. Like you're instinctively like, people are struggling to pay their rent. How are people paying $10,000 for items? Like there's something where like a $300 box that's sealed that you can open and experience with your family. It's a instinctively feels like a safer.
See, I'm a gambler, so
more
I
understandable. Well, there's that. It could be that element too of the opening, but like, and I get that, and I do think, guys, like for everyone out there, like this is why investing is not about vibes and feelings. It's about looking at historical trends and data. And I would put those up against Dan's instincts on grading. Now, that being said, could Dan be right that we're in a 60-year grading bubble? Like our 50-year grading bubble, which is what it would have to be at this point. That's a long
going
time.
back to 80s coins. Yeah.
Yeah,
like,
that's a long time now for like humans to just be like, you know what? I don't like third party, because I do think like, I think what it adds is it takes items that have the most nostalgia and the most and have really good rarity, but they need the condition rarity to become grails. And that's what it does. So it takes a first edition Charizard and it moves it from being like to like a grail because it provides that condition rarity on top. And that just provides such a psychological service that like trophy cards don't need to be graded. Like, yes, people are going to pay extra for trophy cards, and trophy cards are kind of interesting, but the hit of a trophy card is already in it. It's rare enough. The absolute condition of a trophy card. Not every trophy card, but I'm talking about, I'm just throwing out trophy card, but like, your original Pikachu trophy is what, whatever, right? But with a card like that, like, and providing the service of differentiating value, and look at Black Labels, such an interesting conversation, right? I mean, we see what Black Labels have provided some people right now. I don't know if that will hold up the same way. Like, I don't know how much you can continue to, oh yeah, no problem, Dan. I'll keep it going. Dan will be right back. Anyway, I know we've been ignoring you guys this whole time. If you guys have like questions, I can definitely, we can engage with you guys too a little bit. But Dan and I have not had this conversation in a long time, so we're enjoying it, and hopefully you guys are getting some value from it. We can definitely get into more specifics too. Let's see. Let's see what people are saying. I guess I'll touch on this. Like, it's hard to justify more and more. I can't pin the comments because I'm not in charge of the stream here, but Zard Lurking says it's hard to justify more and more. I was jumping into just a question while you were gone, Dan, but we can also jump back into
the whole time. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So like, this is just a question that I get a lot. So I think it can be just like helpful. Like, what I would say is like, it's such a guessing game. This is one of the things, this is such a hard, my dad has been struggling with this for 50 years of like, he really struggles to sell his investments. It's why it's part of what, and part of this even goes interestingly into like the last conversation we were having. We all have personality blind spots that make us not ideal investors. Some people struggle to buy because they're not able to look at the hard data, or they have their biases that they bring into it. Other people struggle with selling for a variety of reasons. And I do think one thing that can be difficult is, for me, is emotionally the fun of being right, the fun of holding the item and being right. If I sell it, sometimes that can feel like it's the end. It's like I've let go and now I can't continue to ride it up. And there can be an emotional component that can make me not sell or mistakenly hold things. Because I become emotionally attached to the item and emotionally attached to the potential of it going up, if that makes sense, guys. So I'm literally emotionally attached to like the possibility that it could go up. So I'm getting a dopamine high because I know it's in my room and it could go up in value at any time. And that provides me some sort of, and that actually can happen with stocks. It can happen with anything, believe it or not. Like, my dad has it with stocks, even though I say to him, like, you just buy more of the stock. It's the same stock. You can get it at any time, and you can just press a button.
Fungible. Yeah.
It's still the same thing. He has the same thing. And so, and it can be, I think, a little harder in this because we're obviously collectors. Like, the only reason, a big part of why we're investing in these things is because we're collecting and we're enjoying it. And so it's a personal decision, blah, blah, blah. But I do think that's important to think about. And one thing I try and do to afford the items in my collection, sometimes I will, when an item goes up a lot, I will flip it a few times. This is sort of my cheat. It's not a solution, but it forces me to like earn keeping it when I maybe shouldn't keep it by flipping it, like taking a really high offer and then buying the next auction. So oftentimes when cards get really hot, there are people out there that just like all of a sudden come out of the woodwork. I like throw the card on Instagram and I get all these offers for like a low pop PSA 10. And then a month later, like 6 of them come for auction and I'm able to buy it back at 80%. Things like that. So like I will sell it with the idea that I'm getting way over current market. So not only has it gone up a lot, but I'm also getting an offer way above market. I'm more likely to sell a collection piece in that condition, right? with the idea that I'd probably be able to get it back cheaper, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, sometimes the items just go so parabolic that, and this happened in 2020 when in 3 months I had items 30x, 30x in 3 months that I just sold. I sold a third of everything. And then I just put that into my business and kind of slowly bought that stuff back. But it was also a personal, I didn't have the money at that time to like start flipping more. So like I needed that money to do more also. So there were reasons. So it's so the answer is it's very difficult. We're human beings and we're not, I think I'm much better at buying and investing than I am at getting myself to sell. And to time correctly. It's part of why I like the long-term investing, because I get to dictate the market, right? Like items that I'm trying to hold and buying multiple items of certain items and cards. Like I like taking Instagram messages when I have 2 buyers trying to buy it from me and there are none on the market. That's how I like to sell a card for my collection. The business is totally different. The business, I'm selling the same card 500 times, liquidating ultra modern super quick. The investing, I'm trying to own items and cards that function more like that. And when I'm selling them, I'm trying to sell them into those types of environments, into those types of moments. But it's a very personal decision. When I do consultations around it, I really ask people like a lot of specific questions, like what percentage of your net worth is this card? What else could you do with the money? Like those are the things I'd be thinking about, making sure you're thinking it all the way through. And please talk to your partner and spouse. These are like, and your family, like, I don't know. Like, I think that it's good to communicate these decisions, and because they can be big decisions and, they can really impact you and your partner. And I don't know, those would be like at the top of my head, the things that would come up for me. And I've struggled with doing that at times because I don't want to have to explain it to Sarah. I don't think she's going to understand. I don't want to have to convince her, these things come up, and yeah, go ahead, Dan.
And everyone's situation is significantly different. As crazy as it sounds, like there are items that some people have held over a certain duration and they've 100x, 250x, whatever the number may be. And like there are people that have outperformed that. There are people where having 50 grand at the right place, the right time, maybe not even necessarily financially. Like everyone has different dreams and goals and aspirations. Maybe some people took that 50 grand seed money that they got from selling their Pokemon thing and they opened up the pet sanctuary, rescuing kittens and dogs, and they met their spouse through that. Like everyone's situation is so different. We're all optimizing and maximizing for different things. So like in hindsight, Monday morning,
but we're all optimizing through math, even for happiness, right, Dan? Like psychos, like robot psychos, you and I.
For sure.
Everyone, you guys all function that way too, right? It's not just Dan and I who are weird.
Very sick. We are very, very ill. Mentally.
I love you 3 units. Like you are worth 3 units.
but that's where like that's a very serious consideration, is that some people's goals and passions and all this sappy blah 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 stuff, like some of that stuff is very time sensitive. Some of that stuff is very like opportunity cost heavy in ways that are not entirely financial. Again, I don't, and some people are here only for the money. I have an investment portfolio that's worth $500,000 today, and the only thing I care about is cold hard numbers. I want to make this number go up by the most amount possible, and in the next 5, 10, 20, 50 years, I want to die with the biggest net worth possible. Those are not things that I'm optimizing for. Some amount of everything, some amount of me buying those trophies is gambling Dan, investor speculating Dan. Some amount of it is collector boy Dan coming through too. When I bought that PSA 10 first edition Venusaur, I could be wrong. I don't think I've ever owned a PSA 10 first edition Venusaur before. Holding that card for a month or two, it was worth something to me, just as like, this is history. This is something. I've been here 11 years at the time. I've never owned this card. It is really cool to kind of like I talk about this too. Like I don't feel the need to own everything. Gotta catch them all at once. I'm too broke to do that, frankly. If I could someday own a master's key for 6 months or a year or a couple of years, that'll be great. Do I have to have a master's key at all times for the next 50 years? No, I probably never will. I've kind of come to the terms with like that's just not where I'm at. That's not what I'm going to be. I've owned a full art Pikachu set 1 through 4 before. That was really cool. And then part investor speculator creating the business Dan, using that liquidity, using that capital to allocate it elsewhere in my business. Part of it was that, and part of it was just like, hey, I think financially, like I think not to the extent that it was hindsight, I timed those really well. But yeah, there's so many moving parts to all these calculations. It's just impossible to like fully optimize, especially when like my portfolio today consists of 5 pallets co-owned with my dad, and a garage full and a basement full and a warehouse full and a bunch of stuff with streamer A, B, C, D, and a bunch of stuff down in an LGS in New Jersey and a bunch of stuff down in an LGS in North Carolina. And like there are so many moving parts that it is fully impossible to optimize everything to like the exact like fullest extent. Um, but yeah, I just going back to this lab thing, like I just have this built-in fundamental disagreement with the market. And I know that like the whole, in my opinion, we are very irrational. It's funny because like I think almost everyone agrees. Almost everyone agree that grading we are irrational. I can get 95% of people to agree with me on the Bubble Mew $250,000. A lot of people draw the line there and they say that's crazy. I go further and I say that the PSA 10 Bubble Mew relative to the PSA 9 Bubble Mew is crazy. A lot more people can justify that, but if you can wrap your minds around this, and I might gain some people here, and not in agreement, but at least in understanding. I see the PSA 10 Bubble Mew obviously not as crazy and bad as the Black Label Bubble Mew for $250,000, but I see it on that spectrum. Like Black Label Bubble Mew, 250 grand is 9.9 out of 10 insanity. I see the PSA 10 on many of these cards, like right up there too. Just absolutely insane to me. I fundamentally disagree. One, because crack that Bubble Mew out and regrade it 50 times with BGS. Does it Black Label 5 times and it BGS 10s 30 times and it BGS 9.5s 15 times? That's probably fairly accurate. Honestly, if I had to like guess, crack out your average PSA 10 Bubble Mew and grade it 50 times. It PSA 10's 35 and it PSA 9's 10 and it PSA 8's randomly for seemingly no reason 5 times probably. Like that's where I get lost on all the grading stuff because I've seen too much. I know too much. I've been here too long. So that's where I come from on the grading thing.
I think that where you have to think about it is it's you have to think about it's not just the hyper focus on should the card be a 9 or 10 and is the whitening that's actually not the experience of it, right? The experience, people aren't actually spending a lot of time looking at that card. They're looking at it briefly.
Don't tell Jojo Jake that.
Seeing it's a 10 and getting a feeling of like this is the best it can be and sense of completeness. And so part of it is just understanding that the value comes from the difficulty of getting the grade. It doesn't come from and for Black Label people, it's the difficulty of getting the Black Label. It's not actually as much about the card. Now, they also want the card to look perfect, I'm sure, particularly when you start getting in those, buying the card and the grade. But listen, these are pieces of cardboard. You can tear it apart. You can tear apart anything very easily is my counter argument, right? You can tear apart. Where do you draw the line of what's crazy and what's not crazy? At the end of the day, people have expendable income and they want to feel something and be a part of something, and they want to feel like they have something rare and exclusive. They want the excitement of hunting that item down. They want the excitement of having things that other people don't have, and then sharing those things with those people. They want the shared experience of going on collecting journeys with other people and trading with them, and the difficult, and building things out together. And I think it's all great. Like, I think all that, like, as long as people are having fun and enjoying it. And I think picking that apart too much and being like, this is rational, this is irrational. But I think, however, I do think that when you bring in the financial side, you do want to ask, not is it rational or is it irrational, but is it, I wouldn't even use the rational and irrational, because that gets into sort of like rational, irrational market, which is what I do think about all the time. But more, I would use the words more like, is this sustainable? Is it short-term marketing, sort of narrative based? People are being told to like tens. People are being told to like black labels by influencers. People are only enjoying it because of other people are enjoying it? Or is there something inherent in people wanting the best of the best and then taking an item and creating more rarity to it? And I think absolutely people want that. I think that's at the core of the chase. And I think this provides it. So I think it's a humongous value add. Like, I think grading is a massive value add from a dopamine release. Similar to gambling. You lose money gambling, but it's a massive value add, because you're getting the dopamine release. So I would push it for you to think of it a little bit differently, that the value is in that dopamine experience, which you don't get, it sounds like, from it. But I do think I get it, other people get it. And I don't think anyone's being like, this idea that people are like, these companies are pushing it on people. Like, I really think it's very human. It's like a very natural human at the core of collecting. And I'm more the people who, like, they love to collect and they're like, I would never put a card in plastic. That's like destroy. Like, I think those people are just fake reacting. Like 90% of those people are just fake having reaction. What's called a reaction formation, where they're like, they just want to like be the true collector and hate on other people. There's like an over. Now, that being said, for you, you're just having a genuine reaction. Like, you don't want to pay a lot more money for a 10 than a 9. I just don't think you want to pay that much money for anything that doesn't have super absolute rarity, which is why the only time you ever put a lot of money into stuff is trophy cards, which makes sense to me. That's the only area where you see, and you only would buy them too because of the prices as low as it was. Like, you need, even that, I think you need 2 or 3.
The thing is that I bought them at all-time highs. Like, when I assembled my sets of 1 through 4 Pikachus, I paid. It was at the time. So I have historically at various times in my journey. Like, I remember some of my PSA 9. I think like is there a Weezing? I think it was the Expedition Weezing. There's an E4 buy thread out there somewhere. I want to say I offered like $75 on a PSA 9 Expedition Weezing. Maybe it was Aquapolis. It was one of the e-reader Weezings.
Muck is Aquapolis. Weezing's Expedition?
I think it was Expedition. But anyways, I remember offering like 50% above market. There was none on the market at the time. I was paying like, I think what was an all-time record high, because it's like I want the completion. I'm a collector. I want the completion. Having this hole in my collection is causing me to stress. I just want to finish it. And so I in my journey, like, there were definitely times that I overpaid for individual pieces, all-time highs, because I just wanted them. But the biggest thing that comes back and always gets me is like the lack of reproducibility. If I buy a clean 10, it's like, and then I always see the best value in the 9s. But then it's like, why don't I just make this a 10? Because if I submitted enough, it could get a 10. And then this is all stupid. Let me sell it. That's where I always end up.
So I am noticing the time.
It is.
I have a newborn that I need to relieve my wife eventually. I could talk for an endless amount of time about this. I thoroughly enjoy the conversation. You have a great audience too. Just like, it's nice being around just like, people deep in the hobby who obviously like just have a lot of knowledge and are adults. It's very pleasant.
This was an interesting change up, because usually what I do, the madman that I am, I usually go live and I answer every question in chat. So I apologize for not having gotten to every question in chat, But
we can take like I can stay for another like 15 minutes if you want to just take a few.
if people
And
have
then
questions, feel
yeah.
free to ask them.
I do think we should do a part two, maybe even on my channel about like because we I feel like we only really got in depth at all around to 100,000, and I do think we should talk about our journey from 100,000 to a
And then we
million and
went,
what we could do.
yeah, we jumped from 1 million and beyond, and we got into
Yeah, we
all
just started
the.
talking about investing because that's what we wanted to, what I wanted to
So,
talk
so
about again.
tonight we covered the 10,000 to 100,000, and then the million to infinity. But
Yeah,
we will follow up at some point with the.
yeah,
So if anyone has any questions, we'll hang out for a little bit longer
yeah.
potentially. But yeah, there are a couple that I started throughout, so I'll start
Yes.
popping a couple up on. Open Mango said, "What do you make of a market that in 1 year no one wants a card for 800, when the next year they're okay with spending 20K?" Presumably, what's happening here oftentimes is the people that are spending 20K today, not always, but the majority of them, in my opinion at least, weren't here when it was 800. The majority of people buying Evolving Skies today for 2,500. I know you gave your example. I don't know what card you were talking about, but the majority, in my opinion, of people that are buying these PC ETBs at $1,500 for a 151 PC ETB, I think the majority of them weren't around $1,000 U151 UPCs. I don't think they were around a year and a half, 2 years ago when they were at Costco unlimited for $80. So that's the main answer. But the secondary answer, the scarier part to the minority of people, I think, is that when people see other people like price go up, so price go up. So there are some amount of people today buying 20K cards that were 800 a year or two ago, just because other people are doing it. Card went from 800 to 20K, it 25x once, so I'm gonna buy it before the next 25x. I think that's the minority, though. What's your read on that? Like the split between the two that I laid out there?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious, like, what card went for exactly which card he's talking about here that went from 800 to 20,000. Because I would say, like, listen, not every card is the same, and I'm not going to have the same reaction to every card. However,
Yep.
if any card goes from 800 to 20K, even if I think it was the most undervalued card ever, and I think it's starting to get back into like where it should be relative to some other items, I'm still going to be extremely cautious, and I'm going to ask those questions. Who's buying it? Who is the person just that like they weren't here to Dan's point? There could just be a lot of people who are coming in with a lot more money who now are wanting it and who can afford it and are going to hold it depending on what the item is. Now, if the item is a very rare item, you're not going to need as many people, right, who are in that category. If the item is, if there's thousands of them, tens of thousands of them, that's so scary. You need a lot of money, to move an item where there's 10,000 copies from 800 to 20K. That's a big market cap shift, and it would be concerning. That's a big jump, 800 to 20K. So I don't know exactly what card's done that, but
Yeah, I'm trying to think what it could be, but yeah, 25x, like it as you said, it depends. The card matters.
Yeah, if
Here's
you're
an
still here,
interesting
if you
one.
want to share the card that you're thinking of or something, I'm happy to
Yeah.
give more specifics. But I mean, again, I would go back to what I said before. Look at the fundamentals, right? Now the question is, why weren't you buying it at 800, and why are you? That's concerning. If you knew it the whole time, either you don't trust your analysis or convictions that you didn't buy it at 800 and now you're buying it 20,000, right? So jumping on the bandwagon, be careful if you were here, right? And now you're, but now if you owned it at 800 and you're like, I thought it had really good whatever, and now it's 20,000. Hopefully that's the scenario you were in. Now you have a decision to make. Do you still think it's
It could be like a One Piece card.
Okay.
So Open Mango is somebody that actually turned me on. I think they turned me on to. I bought through one of my distros, Dragon Ball Super Fusion World. I don't even know what it is exactly, but a couple years ago too, like somebody was talking about One Piece in my chat, so my distro had it. I bought some, and that might have been Open Mango too. I can't remember.
So I bought a bunch of the Bandai on a speculation years ago. I bought a bunch of the English like original Bandai for $1 a pack, and they're now $300 a pack. And I just found that out a month ago.
Nice.
I'm a genius, guys. Brilliant investor. Never forgot I owned them. Someone had to
What was
tell me
Pokemon?
about it. I wasn't even aware. Yeah.
That feels like a radar thing. Did radar was radar the one that told you, hey, you bought these and they're worth this now?
No, no, I forgot the guy's name on Instagram. Just yeah, but yeah, someone just reached out to me and was like, "Do you have any of this stuff?" Because they remembered that I used to talk about like making these kind of like picking all of the best Japanese IPs. I basically picked all of the biggest animes and I went and bought the first like English versions of all of them and tried to buy the first Japanese versions of all of them, basically, with the theory that if anime ever pops, I'm big on non-sports card collecting. I also have like the first ever Disney cards. Like I think all this stuff is super undervalued in general. Although some of the stuff is now popped to the point where it's like, again, that's a great example of like, what am I doing? If someone came and offered me $300, I'd be happy to sell most of those, and take most of the profit and put it into something else. But anyway.
Open Mango is the one that put me on the Fusion World. So I pre-ordered something like 9 months out. I want to say back in January. I think I have something coming in September. I want to say I bought like 12 cases maybe. I have no idea what it is. I have no idea if it's looking like it's going to be a good thing or a bad thing. But I guess thank you or no thank you to Open Mango for that. We'll see how it pans out in September.
Yeah, but if we're talking about like, I mean, to further answer it, like let's take that One Piece item, $1 to $300. That is an example of a market more similar to the way Pokemon used to be, although even more extreme, where you go from no interest to some interest, and items can 300x because if there aren't that many of the items, if there are very few of the items, an item going from $1 to $300 isn't even that much money in today's card collecting environment. So people who are just getting into it now could see $300 for the first ever One Piece, English pack and be like, that's a steal compared to what Pokemon's doing from, what I mean? So like smart people can develop these narratives. Whereas back then there was just no one knew that no interest basically, and so going from no to a little interest can do dangerous, volatile, crazy things. Now, to my point, if there's a lot of an item, though, it's going to take a lot of demand. Or the other thing that could happen is it could pop up to 300 and then a bunch of people put it onto the market. People realize there's a lot more of it than there was in the item and the value comes crashing back down.
Yeah.
So, obviously Pokemon, depending on the item, probably there really aren't any Pokemon items that I think have that level of, people don't know about them and they're going to have that type of volatility, because they just have no price history, basically.
In a card like this, like again, a card like this, 250x in the past 10 years. If you had talked to me 10 years ago when I got this as a Secret Santa gift, I would have said the odds of this. I wrote on the back actually. Shout out to you probably remember him, Joe the Man, but he spelled it TEH, Joe to Man, or I don't know. I remember that. So shout out to him. 2016 Secret Santa. He got me this.
You should give it back.
A
nice guy would give it back.
Yeah. If you had told me this was going to 250x, I wouldn't have remotely believed it. And if you told me like this is a statement of fact that like in the next 10 years, this card, it's like, okay, like the hobby must have grown some massive amount. The reason that this could 250x is because most people buying it for 10K today were just inherently, fundamentally not present in the hobby. And again, I don't know exact numbers. I presume the pop of the Hiroshima, the one I like the Hiroshima one the best because it has the Shining Gyarados on it. Very, very like mild cold take is that the pop of that is going to be significantly higher. The print run of that is going to be significantly higher because of the time that we're in.
So a card like that is a perfect example of just having everything fortunate going for it. And what I mean by that is like at the time, the reason it's gone up so much is also because it was so cheap then. So, and the reason it was so cheap then is because there were so few Pokemon collectors that was not a rare item. There were too many of that item when it was coming out. Like, so there weren't enough collectors. So the item was like pretty valueless. Like there was pretty much no interest in it. Right. So it's the perfect combination of like that mixed with like, then a ton of people come in and the amount, the few thousand copies end up being like not nearly enough for the sizable demand. And then you have Pat Flynn saying it's his favorite cards, and you have, the biggest influencers in the space like talking about it, not because they're shilling it, but just because they like it. And then the rest takes over the narrative, the amount, but it's understanding how that card got from there to there is valuable. Now, how do you predict? Nothing. I don't think anything can do that anymore. Is part of the problem. We're just not in a period like that. But if a card today comes out and it does that, I would argue that other cards are going to outperform. I don't think there's a card that can come out today that can outperform in the same way. If people are following what I'm saying, like the reason that card so outperformed is because it had so little value then.
It was $30 then.
Yeah.
It was $30, so it could 300x to $9,000.
Same thing. So, like for example, I was buying PSA 10 level X's for $30, and those are now 15, 12,000. Some of them, right?
Yeah.
And zero demand to. And so they were like, just nobody wanted it. So it just someone graded it because they shouldn't have graded it. Card Rush Inc. opened a bunch of the boxes.
I remember those auctions they used to do. That was insane.
And just auctioned all the boxes. They opened a ton of sealed boxes, graded the cards, and just auctioned them all off. And so for months and months and months, anyone who was like, we were all picking up, $15.
I was buying all the 9s. I was buying the 9s for 15. You were buying the 10s for 30.
I was buying a lot of the 9s too. So you and I were bidding on the same things, all the secret, whatever. But it's just a great example of like how going from zero demand, similar to the One Piece, zero demand. And what I mean by zero demand is not that there's actually zero demand, but there's too many copies for the amount of demand.
Supply to demand was functionally infinite.
Yes.
Because there was 1 unit of demand and there was 10 units of supply. I guess infinite's the wrong word, but like 10 to 1, whatever the ratio was.
Is, right? So like the concept of scarcity, we're talking about like
it was surplus.
Surplus. Yeah.
And just to demonstrate too, like this card per card ladder is $8,800 today, and 10 years ago it was $30 or $40. I don't remember the exact numbers. I wish we had better price data history. But the pop of this card today, $2,325. Just to give context for like when I talk about the concept of future optimism being pulled into today, the Hiroshima, I don't know which way you're supposed to say that. Hiroshima, I think, right? The Hiroshima has a pop of 16.3 thousand. So the pop is 8 times as much. And the price is $485. So the price of the Hiroshima, the pop is 8 times what the pop of this is 10 years later. Simultaneously, the price is 15 times what the price of this was at the same time. So the pop is 10 times and the price is 15 times. So like, and maybe bearish Dan will be proven too bearish again. Fundamentally, the Hiroshima's Pikachu fundamentally cannot and will not perform the same way that this did, because for that to 300x, it would have to be worth $150,000 in 10 years. Will a pop 16,000 Hiroshima's Pikachu be worth $150,000 in 10 years? Call me a bear. I'm going to say no.
Well, and I would look at it even this way. Like, let's put that aside. So we're buying trophy cards that are pop 3s for $20,000. So those won't be $150,000 too.
Yeah.
Like what do those need to be, right? So like if those get to $150,000, fine. But it's like it gets to a point where like it will crack under the weight of irrationality. Like this is where like things can only get so rational. Like I explain this stuff to, like, for example, like new people in the hobby. I'll say, hey, here's this card and I'll talk about it. And I'll say, hey, here's this card and I'll talk about it. And they say, I think that card's $2 million and this card's $100,000. And then I say, this card's $100,000, this card's $20,000. Right.
Yeah.
And it breaks under its own obviously doesn't make sense eventually, but it can take, again, it's a knowledge thing. It's
Irrational longer than you can remain solvent, that whole thing.
well,
Like,
all that, yeah, for sure.
yeah.
And also just it's such an attention driven thing, right? And so we have to be real with that narrative creation. Because these are non-producing assets, narrative creation is so powerful. It's like someone needs to tell them that it's okay. You can like that. It does make sense that it's better. Like you are having a bigger dopamine reaction to that card. It does excite you more. It's okay. Like it. It's So I think and I there's definitely irrational exuberance for sure, but there's also just a lot of just like new people having fun and are excited, and it takes time to sort it out and figure it out and enjoy what they enjoy. And all these people, they're used to $300 boxes out of the gate, so that's what they pay because they want to open Pokemon cards, right? They're just comparing it to what it is right now. So anyway, any last minute questions? I'm happy to stay for another minute or two, and then I should relieve Sarah.
Yeah, why don't we make this our last one, and then we'll wrap up by 1 a.m. What % of long-term investing Pokemon items that you bought in the last 5 years haven't hit their long-term price targets already? For me, like, all of them have pretty much. And part of the reason I wanted to take this one is, like, part of why I did the pallets is that, and this is, again, this is me being crazy. Like, do not try to replicate what I'm doing. By all metrics, I'm being a little bit crazy. Historically speaking, I've been in the hobby since, like, I bought Phantom Forces cases from Distro for $480 a case, for $80 a booster box. I was allocated Team Up. I was allocated all these sets over these years. And I set these in my head. I set these numbers like, hey, I'm going to hold these for 5 or 10 years, and I'm going to sell it ideally in 5 or 10 years when they're 300, 500, whatever they were per box. My first 10 years of the hobby, from 2014 to 2024, everything always hit my price target way earlier than I expected, and I always sold all of it. I don't have any boxes of XY era. I don't have any boxes of Sun Moon era that I got originally allocated. So part of it is, like, I've been too bearish for too long. I'm gonna force myself. I like, no matter how much I squirm. Right now, I'm squirming a little bit over $700 Destined Rivals booster boxes after 12 months. Every part of me wants to sell them all. Every part of me thinks this is stupid. They're going to go down. Even if they're not going to go down, they're going to return less relative to other things in the same time frame. So every fiber of my being wants to sell Destined Rivals. But you know what? Another part of my being realizes that in 7, 8, 9, 10 years, those might be $10,000 booster boxes. And if and when they are, I want to have a case. I want to have 2 cases for my original allocation. It's so stupid. It's so crazy. In a lot of ways, it's kind of irrational, but it's a relatively small fixed percentage of my net worth, of my cash flow, of my capital. And I will own from Sword Shield through Scarlet Violet onward. I will own 10 years after release, 15 years after release. I will own at least a case of those sets. I am forcibly causing myself to do that. 10, 20 years from now, I might crack a beer like on my yacht. That was the best decision I ever made because Evolving Skies is a $50,000 booster box. It's a $300,000 booster case. Or I might crack a beer in the alley because I'm homeless and destitute because I lost all my money in those pallets.
You'll be just fine.
Yeah.
So here's my worst performer. So I owned one of these cards, okay? Before I bought one of these cards 5 years ago for something like $5,000 or $6,000. And since then,
I think I know what it is.
And since then, it's on a card that sells a lot, but the card is selling anywhere between $3,000 and $8,000. So it got down to so it got down to $3,000. Yeah. But look what I've been able to accomplish. So this is investing in action. So, like, the fact that the price has gone down is I hope that it goes to $100, guys, so I can just own them all. Like, First of all, I just would be happy owning every
And you
single
say
one.
that, one thing I feel the need to point out, like you say that and you mean it, like you will buy them. A lot of people say that, oh, if
The
it
only
goes to
reason I'm
zero, I'll
showing
buy
it is
them
because
all.
people don't believe online, and I never show stuff. And I do get
But
a
a lot of
comment,
people say
understandably,
that.
because most
A
people
lot
are
of
full
people
of
say
shit.
that and they don't mean it. Yeah,
I
a lot of
actually
people say
have
that
millions
they'll
of dollars
panic
of Pokemon
sell.
cards.
Yeah.
So I'll just show one stack from like the first year. Champion, 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 champion. That's half my stack from just 1 year. So what I do when this happens is I say, it's a Warren Buffett thing. I say phenomenal, and the biggest owner of these has recently sold his entire collection and flooded the market, which is why it went down. So not only do I believe that the cards were way undervalued initially, but then the biggest horde of them that
A
existed,
not replicable
event happened,
stockpile. Yeah.
all came on at once. And, and I was able to pick these up at prices that I'm really happy about. So now, I wish that it happened with WotC and Gold Stars over the last 3 years, and the boom had happened 4 years later, because I'd have $100 million, if the boom had happened, if I had 4 or 5 more years to accumulate. Right. So that's, it's part of this type of thing of like, the boom is great, but it also stops you from like being able to afford it and accumulate things in a way that rationally makes sense. So like I used to do that with Gold Stars and with WotC, where you buy anyway. The point in showing that stuff is like conviction, buy what you like, buy things that have good fundamentals that make sense. And listen, let's say these don't work out, these go down, these, whatever. There's such a small percentage at this point of what I've collected in my network. I'm very in all of the Gold Stars, and I still have my collections of every set, my complete PSA 10, PSA 9 collections of every single set in Pokemon. So part of why I'm able to speculate on these into such a niche item, even though I think they're very undervalued, is because I have a lot of things that are less niche that also fit the sort of historical category. So I wouldn't just put my money in these things. I think you need to balance them out in a variety of things. I feel obligated to share and say all of that. But, and then people are mentioning like, when I just like have some ETBs that, just randomly had, that I forgot that I had, and I just were sitting around, and it's the same thing. Like I probably should sell them, but they're a fun thing in the background, and you can't capture every dollar, guys, and then, yeah.
There are certain things that I hold on to that are like, I might change my mind when the Great Vault hat hits 50 grand and I feel the need to sell it. But like, I want to own this forever. I always want to think back to that crazy play me and John made, making so much money and then shorting ourselves so much money if we had just held it an additional year longer or whatever. And then I have somewhere hidden in there, I have like an Evolutions booster box to remember that time where I was just buying them from distro, selling them into eBay, and buying and selling, and then they just rocketed to $1,000. So I like throughout my journey, I intentionally just like set back certain mementos to be like a reminder of a certain specific time. But I think with that, probably call it, because it is 1 a.m. You should definitely relieve the wife, get some good time with the baby. Appreciate everyone being here as always. Appreciate you, Jake, for coming on with us. Definitely a great chat. It's been a while. It's been a long time since I've had you on the channel. Yeah. I think Flips you've been on in the past year, but
really? Oh gosh.
I'm pretty sure we had you on.
I don't even remember. I mean, I've been on Flips a couple of times, but you've been running Flips a long time.
5.5 years now. I want to say we had you on in the past year. I'm gonna search.
I don't think I've been on YouTube at all for years. Like I think I maybe made one YouTube, but I don't think I went anywhere else. Yeah.
On your own channel, you've made a couple like semi re-entries back on.
Well, now I've been back, yeah, and I do plan, honestly, largely to support my business and to support all of the guys who are working with me and for me, and to support their hard work. I want to not let my my influencer status 100% die.
Yeah.
You and I have very valuable influencer statuses as pillars. I hear you're a pillar of the hobby. That's what
I'm headed for 5-figure sub count. So, but yeah, with that, very much appreciate you being here, Jake. Very much appreciate everyone being here, spending the night with us. Definitely go if you want. I don't think I linked you down in the description, but the Patreon. We talk every week in Discord. We've got to do the YouTube thing, right? Like, subscribe, go find Jake Pokenomics on YouTube. The Patreon is linked down below. Anything else to add in closing?
I'm expecting Dan to at least lose or gain 30 subscribers from this. So up to you guys.
We just want the numbers to move in one direction. Yeah.
I think that was the goal of that drunk stream we did that one time, was like, we want to, are people listening, or is everyone asleep?
Yeah.
People just,
I think,
I want to see the numbers move.
I don't even have.
Please,
I used to have it overlaid. I don't have it overlaid.
Please help Dan get to 10K so that he can stop killing himself. And then he can have made his goal, and he can feel like, oh, okay, whew.
I'm done now. Delete the channel. But yeah, thanks everyone. Goodbyes are always hard. Let's not turn this into a 2 a.m. live stream. Thanks everyone for watching. We will catch you all later.